having been duly sworn to tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth relating to said matter, was examined and testified as follows. Direct examination questions by Mr. Baldwin. State your name for the record. It's Roland Richard Purdy, P-U-R-D-Y. How do you spell your first name? Roland, R-O-L-A-N-D. To your knowledge, are there any other Roland Purdys in the state police? Not to my knowledge. So, we laugh because this morning we had the wrong Harper. We brought in the wrong Harper and then we were all confused. So I just wanted to make sure. Yeah, I don't think there's any other ones. Okay, so what, if anything, did you do to prepare for today's deposition? I read through case reports. I was given access to the case reports, and as you know, there's a ton of them, so I was trying to find mine just to kind of refresh what I've done while I was here. Okay, and I'm presuming you've been through a few depots in your day? Yes? So the main thing is, I'll try to get you to stay on task with a yes or a no, instead of ahas and uh-uhs. Okay, and I will try to ask good questions that don't get too convoluted. If I do, I want you to say, that doesn't make any sense, Andy. Please ask a different question or rephrase it, and I will be happy to do that. Okay, all right, good. Other than review, and you said you were given access. What did you mean by that? You were given access to these reports. Before, I couldn't get into the state police report on the homicide. Access is not, so not all troopers can get into the reports and read the report. So I had to ask for access so that I could get into it. Who did you ask permission of? Jerry Holman. So this is one of our struggles, is trying to understand, how all the information gathered, where it went, and who has access to it. So at some point in time, did you have access to all of the reports? Yes. And then, at some point in time, you no longer had access to the reports? When I was no longer working here in Delphi on this investigation, then I no longer had access to the reports. Okay, and is that just something you knew and understood, or did somebody tell you you no longer had access to the reports? I guess I was told that I no longer had access, or I got on the report and couldn't get to my reports. One or the other. I don't recall how I found out. And approximately when would that been that you found out you no longer had access to your reports? Probably March of 2018. I'm thinking that's pretty much the last that I had worked on the case. We'll get to that too. When was the last time you talked to anybody about the Delphi case? Probably this week. Who did you talk to? I talked to Tony Portwood. He had told me he had gotten a subpoena. Okay, and talked to Jerry Holman about it. How in-depth was that conversation? With Jerry Holman? Not real in-depth, not a lot of information. And in terms I never understand, ranking and all of that, it always confuses me. Where is Jerry Holman to you in terms of the state police hierarchy? He would be 2 ranks above me. Okay, I needed somebody to explain that. I appreciate that. And you talked to, what was that conversation about with Portwood? Tony asked if I had gotten a subpoena, said that he had gotten a subpoena. Not much more than that? And not much more than that. Okay, have you talked to Tony Liggett lately? No, I saw him the other day, but I have not. Just, how are you doing? Where did you see him? At what's the building where they have their office now? Oh, okay, somewhere here in Delphi? Yeah, somewhere here in Delphi. Is that when you were looking up your reports? No, I actually came over here for a meeting. Oh, okay. Unrelated to Delphi? Oh, it was related to Delphi, just to speak with the prosecutor. Oh, okay. Okay, gotcha. So you've also talked to the prosecutor at some point in time? Yes. Okay, and when was that? Friday. This last Friday. This past Friday? Yeah, that would be I think today's the 21st, so the 18th maybe. It sounds about right. I'd have to look at my phone. Okay, Friday around the 18th, I think. All right, well, just give me a little bit about your background. Where are you from? Where did you go to high school? I grew up in Archibald, Ohio. Oh, where is that? It's west of Toledo. Okay, So I was a city policeman in Archibald for 10 years, and then I joined the state police. I've got almost 27 years on, well, almost 28 years on with the state police now. Wow, 28? So how old are you? I am 57. Okay, I'm the same year, 56, 57. Yeah, okay. You graduated in 84 from high school? Yeah, okay. So I'm just curious. How did you end up from Ohio to Indiana? At the time in Ohio it was my hometown. My dad had been the police chief when I got hired, and I'd always wanted to be a state trooper, and I thought, if I don't do it now, I'm getting older, and if I don't do it now, I'll never do it. So Ohio at the time, their testing process was different, and I didn't want to be a highway patrolman. And Indiana was hiring, so I applied over here. Okay, where was your first job out of? Fort Wayne. Okay, and if you don't mind, daggone, let me just get it out of the way. Clearing throat. All right, so I think that helps. All right, so give me kind of your movements. You were in Fort Wayne for so long, and then you moved to another post and all that kind of stuff? So I worked out of the Fort Wayne post when I was first graduated from the academy. I worked the road, so I graduated in 95 from the academy. I worked the road, primarily in LaGrange and Noble counties until 2007, approximately, where I was placed on an identity theft task force through the U.S. Postal Service. So I investigated identity theft cases for, now you're maybe 5 years approximately, and then from there, I was put in the Organized Crime and Corruption Unit. And then, leading up to 2017, there was talk I was going to go into the FBI as a task force officer. So in 2017, the FBI did my background investigation, and while I was waiting to get the results from my background investigation, they sent me to Delphi because I didn't have access to any of the federal computers or anything like that. So I came over here and worked leads. Did that kind of derail the FBI task force? No, I was actually on the task force then, once I left here. Actually, my March 2018 is when my credentials came in. Oh, okay, so I went back to the... So, did you work with Greg Ferenczi then? No, I talked to Greg Ferenczi once, but I'd never met him. Okay, because I think he was on the FBI task force. He was, I think, down south somewhere. Terre Haute. Okay, yeah, I think. See, I don't understand that either. I would think, they're all together, the task force. Yeah, but they're all over the place. Is that right? Yeah, I know he was a task force officer, but like I said, I never met him. We'll be getting to him in a second. And so when you did the identity deception investigation for 5 years, that's kind of like the Catch Me If You Can type of crimes. The movie where people are, is that what that is? Yeah, it seemed like at the time it was more illegal aliens using Americans' identities to work under. And then eventually, towards the end of it, it was credit card. People using other people's credit cards. Okay, so not as exciting as catching the bad guys. I enjoyed it, but yeah, no, it wasn't that exciting. Well, it's a big problem. My son had that issue. It's somewhat settled. All right, I wanted to ask, okay, particularly about how did you kind of explained a little bit of how you got involved in the Delphi case. How? Did you get called? Did you volunteer? How does that all work? Initially, they were looking for volunteers. I volunteered and came over and was just following up on leads. And when you volunteer, do you have to go to your commander and say, hey, I'd like to volunteer? Or how does that work? I don't know if they put out an email just asking for volunteers. I don't recall. Okay, how that came about. And when you show up, I'm just trying to imagine this. You just kind of show up and say, hey, I'm here to help. How do you know who to talk to, and who did you talk to? I think they told us who to talk to. I believe Jerry Holman was here and kind of gave a briefing beforehand. And then, if I am correct, I think they teamed you up with somebody and then provided you a lead, and you went out and investigated it and came back. Did they team you up with someone? Yes. And who was that? Jim Burkhart was. I know I was with him a couple times. Al Martinez, I know I was with him, and I only recall because I was reading some of the reports. And what about Kevin Murphy? Were you ever paired with him? Yes. And who, once you kind of got into the rhythm of investigating or helping with the Delphi murder investigation, who were you reporting to? I would say Jerry Holman, as well as my own supervisors. I would have had to let them know. Who were your supervisors at that time? Joe White. He would have been my sergeant at the time. Okay, so yeah, this is where guys like me just get confused about stuff. So you got the Delphi, you say Jerry Holman that you're reporting to, and then you're like direct supervisor? I would have had a direct supervisor who would check, if I'm getting overtime or what hours I'm working, that type of thing. Okay, but not necessarily details on. However, I later in the investigation was asked to look into the geofence, numbers that were captured in the geofence, phone numbers, and Joe White, who was my sergeant, was my partner. Okay, so he did get into some of the action in the Delphi, right? But mainly, and if it's not accurate, just tell me. But mainly that's like a guy that's like, hey, how's it going? How many hours you work this week? That kind of stuff. Yeah, I don't know that he got exact details, so to speak, of what I was doing. But then you think mainly those details from your investigation of the Delphi case would go to Jerry Holman? Clean text, your entire pasted block. I think so. I think that's who was reading the case reports. There's been a lot of we've done. Oh gosh, a number of depositions up to this point. And there's the phrase that I've come to know is unified command. Are you familiar with that? Yeah, who to your knowledge was on the unified command? I would say Jerry Holman, Jay Harper, Kevin Hammond, Tony Liggett, Rich Davies, which was with the FBI. That's pretty much. I think after you left, we've also heard about Vito. Okay, yeah, I think that's not a name familiar to me anyway. Okay, I think those were the names that we keep hearing. So, all right, that's that. And who to your knowledge, when you were working with Kevin Murphy, did he report to? That I'm not sure. I'm not sure if he was on a task force and was assigned to Delphi or what his status was with the state police. What about Jim Burkhart? Do you know who he? Jim Burkhart is an auto theft investigator. So when Burkhart and you were, working together for a period of time on the Delphi investigation, do you know who he reported to? He would have probably kind of the same thing, would have gone to Jerry Holman. If I remember correctly, I think I pretty well typed up the reports when I did things with Burkhart. So, and we were together on the same thing. I don't know if he was here after other than with me. I'm not sure how many times he came. You didn't always have the same people that you went out with. Okay, and while on the topic of typing out reports, what was kind of let's say you go interview Joe Blow and you would want to memorialize that interview. How would you memorialize it? On a case report. Okay, and is that an official state? That's a state police incident supplemental report? And did you take field notes or hand notes as well? At times, yeah. Sometimes if it was recorded, I wouldn't take as many. I would refer back to the recording. And if you did record it, how would that be noted for guys like me who are now trying to? It would probably be listed in the case report, in the supplement that it was recorded, and then our recordings would be submitted as evidence. At the time, it would have been a disc that we would have put in an evidence bag and it would have been taken. Oh, yeah, all right. And I was going to ask you about Greg Ferenczi. You've only talked to him, you think, one time? I think one time on the phone. Okay, was that related to Delphi? Yeah. And do you remember what it was about? I know that he was going to talk to Brad Holder's wife. Oh, okay. But I don't remember. I don't remember what the details were. Okay. And how would it have come into being that you ended up talking to Ferenczi for the one and only time about him, Ferenczi, going and talking to Amber Holder? I know Kevin Murphy and him were working together, and I think Kevin had told him that Kevin and I had been working together, and so he was wanting to call me and touch base with me on that. See if there was anything I knew that he didn't. Okay, so Greg Ferenczi, you think reached out to you based upon Murphy saying something to him? That would be my guess. Yeah. And do you remember the substance of that conversation? I don't. I remember that it had to do with Brad Holder's wife or ex-wife at the time. I know they were going to talk with her. Okay, So do you think that that conversation that you had with Greg Ferenczi happened before Greg talked with Amber Holder or after Greg talked with Amber Holder? Redacted block omitted. No public access text provided. Becky Patty? Boy, I don't know. I don't think... I know I had interviewed her once, but I don't think it was on that interview. I think it was just in passing. And how long had you been on the case, roughly, when you first heard about the Odinite possibility? Maybe a couple months. And so when did you start? As far as that... Yeah, that's not a good question. When did you first kind of come onto the scene and start assisting in the investigation of the murders in Delphi? I would say March of 2017. And so you think it was maybe May or so when you first heard the word Odin or Odinite of 2017? I would say at least May, June. May, June of 2017. Uh-huh. Is that right? Yes. Okay. I'm thinking of the record. Okay. I'm sorry. Redacted block omitted. No public access text provided. I'm always thinking about how it's going to lay out on the page, so when I'm about to start a bad question, I always stop. That's what strike that means. When Jerry Holman told you that the Purdue University person that reviewed the stick formations said it was inconclusive, what then happened related to your involvement in the Odin angle of the investigation? At some point, and I'm not sure when it was, but at some point they said if we wanted to look into that, you know, they wanted the crime solved, so they were happy to have somebody look into it. And who is they? I would say Jerry Holman. I'm trying to think. Oh, let me think. He works under Jerry Holman in Lafayette. Unified Command people, Harper? The witness. No, it wasn't in Unified Command. Oh, well that's okay. I worked with him at Notre Dame. I'm trying to think. Anyway, one of those things that will be nagging at you and you'll remember it when on your way home. Yeah, so I could call you on my way home when it hits me. So the second in command to Holman was somebody else that said, go ahead and look into the Odin angle? I believe. And I believe he gave me a copy of what Purdue University had provided them. Okay, but it wasn't a dead issue, this Odinite angle, based upon the Purdue University report. Is that? No. Okay, let me ask it this way. Is that correct to say that the Odinite angle was not a dead issue once the Purdue report came in? That's correct. Okay, were you given any direction from Jerry Holman in terms of how to investigate the Odinite angle? Or was that kind of up to you? I think it was pretty well up to me. And who else to your knowledge was also investigating the Odinite angle? I worked with Lori Lemler. Lori Lumler? Lemler, Lemler. Do you know if that's Lorie or Lau? I think it's actually the Lourdes. Lourdes, I think is her actual name. She goes by Lori. Okay, so that one, Lori was one of the people working on the Odinite angle. Who else that you know of? That's all that I recall. I think I primarily worked with Lori. Okay, and I want to talk about Lori in a second, but I'm not specifically talking about... When I asked that question, I didn't ask it very well, who you worked with, but more specifically, who do you know that was working on the Odin angle? I think Lori and I were the only ones, because I know earlier you said that Greg Ferenczi had called about Brad Holder. Right. So would that be another person? That would have been after I was gone, though. I mean, after I left Delphi, I didn't know who was doing what at that point. Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. So Lori Lemler? I want to get that right. That is a new name I haven't heard. Is she still with the state police? Yes. And where does she work? Out of the Bremen district. Oh, she's a detective. Okay. And is it like I think about it on television, where you guys are cop buddies and you're in a car and you're driving around and going around? Or is it more you're going around and knocking on doors together? Or is it you're doing things independently? Or how was that working? We were looking at all aspects of the crime. I mean, just because it's an Odinist doesn't mean that you know that that person killed the girls. I mean, there's plenty of Odinists, so we redacted block omitted, no public access text provided. Okay, tell me about Tony Portwood. I remember talking to him about the sticks on the body and showed him it didn't have the bodies, but it was the stick formation. wanting to know if this is a Odinist stick formation, so to speak. Okay, and what did Tony say? Tony kinda gave me a little bit of a breakdown of the Odinists. That you had people who grew up Odinists that were patriotic and family people. And then in the 1880s or so, kind of the Nazis started bastardizing Odinism a little bit. He gave me the example of the swastika, that in his side of Odinism, a swastika is a peaceful symbol, but the Nazis made it into their symbol, of violence. And so he didn't. He thought maybe the sticks were possibly part of the other side, not the side that he was from. Okay, so Tony Portwood did practice Odinism, is that? I said that, and he said maybe like a branch of Odinism. He didn't like me calling him an Odinist, so I different. So I'm not sure if they are so yes, some type of redacted block omitted, no public access text provided. Off with this, did Tony Portwood ever tell you, nah, this is definitely not Odinist stick figurines on the girls or in the tree, definitely not. Did he ever say anything like that? No. Okay. Did you learn about the Odin angle, generally speaking, from any other source other than from the Beverly Shores police captain or police chief? And Tony Portwood. Those were the only two that I could come up with. Next. And did you do it? And did you independent research like I've done on the internet? Google it? Did you ever Google? Oh yeah, I definitely would have looked into it. All right, so now we'll go in a little bit more specific. We talked about generally, how did you learn about Odinism, generally speaking? What specifically did you then do to investigate Odinism in this case? Who did you look into, and how did that all kind of take me step by step, if you would? I remember I looked into Brad Holder, just pulled up the file and was reading back then, and Brad Holder had been cleared. I believe a deputy from, I think, the county is like New Buffalo, but I'm not sure. Or the city is New Buffalo, where he worked, and I believe there was a deputy that went to there and confirmed that he was at work. At one point, I actually went to the workplace, and they confirmed that, yes, he had been at work, and they also had cameras. But of course, when I got there, it was long, and the camera had long been gone, and I never did learn if it had ever been recorded. I know from at least knowing the case that Brad Holder was talked to by some officers up in Hammond, Indiana. Or, I don't know. The officer was from Hammond. I don't think the interview happened up there. I don't have the interview, so I don't know. And on February 17th, just 3 after the girls were found murdered, they interviewed Brad Holder, and he gave it in the alibi. And if you were the person that heard that interview, what would you have done at the New Buffalo? I kind of guess it's a landfill type of place, to verify that Brad Holder's alibi stood up. Well, if I had video, I would have looked to see if I saw him on video. Okay? So, I'm not sure what their, clocking in consisted of or anything like that. So, but would you expect whoever would be investigating that to look into the video of Brad Holder, whether he was at work that day or if it was available, and then I would have. So, I don't know. Yeah, okay. And also, I want to ask while we're talking about this part of it, because you started by saying, I looked into Brad Holder. I guess I should ask this. How was it that you knew to look into Brad Holder? Was that the Becky Patty? Yeah. Okay, the Becky Patty statement. One of the things that I'm way too transparent as a lawyer. I'll tell you, it's not a good trait. But one of the things I thought about when looking into Brad Holder as a suspect here is, well, he don't need to be there necessarily. He could have his minions taking care of business, like Charlie Manson did, or Charles Manson. Was that a thought that you had in your brain? Like maybe he was at work, but maybe somebody else did this on his behalf? I guess I didn't think necessarily. I figured he'd been cleared, and I didn't know of any real motive that Brad would have had to kill the girls. Okay, when you say cleared, that's another, we're trying to understand because I see words at the bottom of these state police reports. What does cleared mean? I would say eliminated as a suspect, or at least the lead unfounded type thing. What about the phrase covered? Is that the same thing if it says covered at the bottom of the page? I guess it depends who wrote it or what they meant. So when you talk to Holman about Holder, Was it your understanding that Holder had been cleared at that point in time as a suspect? See, I don't recall. I don't recall if I read it in the report, or if Holder had told me that, or Holman had told me that. Okay, so we kind of left off before I got sidetracked there, with your going through Holder's file, and you saw that his alibi, at least by the people that had investigated it, had checked out. Is that right? Yes. Okay, then. What did you do next in your Odinite angle investigation? I know I looked probably at Patrick Westfall's because, he was from Delphi. I would have looked at his file as well. Okay, and what led you to investigate Patrick Westfall as a possible person that murdered? I don't remember if Brad Holder's file mentioned Patrick Westfall or if just he was from... Yeah, I don't recall why I would have looked at it. And again, I think is it fair to say that you're looking generally speaking, you said it earlier, for connections. That's correct, between these people that are Odinists and the crime scene. Is that fair to say? Yes. Okay. And even connections with each other and with other people, is that part of what's important in doing an investigation? I'm looking for who committed the crime. Okay, so what? What did your Patrick Westfall investigation tell you or inform you, if anything? That I don't recall. Yeah, that's been 6 years. Sure. And I don't recall what. It seemed like Patrick was with his son on the day of the murders. But I don't recall. I think that's what you said. Much more than that. Was anybody else other than you, to your knowledge, looking into Patrick Westfall? Was there? It would have been Lurie Lemler if... And again, getting back to that question, were you and Lurie meeting up from time to time? Yes. Okay, we were working together. Were you going out together too? Yeah. Okay. So did you ever talk to Brad Holder? Yes. Oh, yes, tell me about that. We figured he'd been cleared. We were curious what Odin meant to him, what it was. Okay, tell me, where did you meet him and approximately when? We met him in Logansport, I believe. That's where he's from? And he told us that he walked around in woods, looking for Odin, speaking to him through sticks. And that's why he had all these stick formations on his, he felt that Odin had put those sticks for him to find. Okay, did he, Brad Holder, tell you that, yes, he has been to the Monon High Bridge area? We didn't talk to him about the homicide. We talked to him about Odinism. Okay. And was that you and Laurie together? Yes. All right. And was that videotaped? I don't know if it was or not. Like I said, I didn't have one, so I don't know if that was recorded or not. Then would you take handwritten notes, or how would that end up being memorialized, that conversation with Brad Holder? I believe we would have taken handwritten notes, and I couldn't find any on mine. Okay, so when approximately did you talk to Brad Holder? If you started in May or June of 2017 investigating the Odin angle, when would you think along the way you would have probably met? I would have said probably July or August. Of 2017? Yes. Okay. All right. So other than getting actually I would say Brad Holder gave you another kind of an overview of Odinism. Yes. From his angle? Yes. Did Brad Holder talk about Patrick Westfall? If you remember? I don't recall. So what was the purpose of talking to Brad Holder, you and Laurie, when you talked to him? I think since he was Logan's father, we wanted to talk to somebody close, just to kind of see what he had to say. Okay, did any alarm bells go off when you talked to Brad Holder? Not that I recall, no. Did you think there should be a report out there of your conversation with Brad Holder? I don't know if I would have typed one or if Laurie would have typed one. But one of you two probably did? Probably, but I don't recall. All right. Have you heard of Elvis Fields? Yes. Okay. Tell me how you know about Elvis Fields. I went with Kevin Murphy to speak with Mary Jacobs, which would be a sister of Elvis, and we'll get to that in a second. I kind of got off track here because you were saying, I first kind of looked at Brad Holder, then you ended up talking to Brad Holder. I looked into Patrick Westfall. Did you talk to Patrick Westfall? No. Okay. And why did you not talk to Patrick Westfall? I don't recall. Okay. And you don't know of anybody that did talk to him? I know there was a report that somebody had, but I don't recall. What about a guy named Johnny Messer? Do you know Johnny Messer? I do not. All right. So after you talked to Brad Holder, and you looked into Patrick Westfall to some degree. What? And we know you talked to Mary Jacobs. Yes. Is that the next thing that you did, or was there something in between those two times? During my time there, you know, I would continue to look up leads, completely unrelated to Odinism. Okay, I would pick up a lead and go and investigate it. I can't recall exactly what I would have done. At one point, I think Lori was only at Delphi for maybe 2 weeks. Oh. And then at that point, then I was back on my own, and I think that's when I started going out on the leads with Kevin Murphy. Okay. How many times do you think you went out on leads with Murphy? Boy, I don't know. Would it be 20 or more, or 20 or less? I would say 20 or less. 10 or more, or 10 or less? Let's go close to 10, I would think. All right. I think we'll be getting into those, because I'm going to be showing you some stuff here and seeing if it refreshes your memory. Okay, I know at some point in time. Okay, let's talk about Mary Jacobs. Okay, you said you and Murphy went out to talk to Mary Jacobs? Yes, okay. What did you know going into the conversation with Mary Jacobs, and who did you know it from? Not much information. Kevin had pretty well, it was a lead that Kevin was working on, and we went out to, because he asked me to go with him too. So I didn't know a lot of information going into it. Probably what he would have told me on the way to Rushville. Tell me what tell me what your memory of the conversation with Mary Jacobs or the interaction with Mary Jacobs. Mary's house was built into the side of a hill, and I remember she invited us in the house. I remember we sat down in I think it was like a porch type area. And then she told us that her brother had mentioned a little bit about the girls from Delphi, but to her knowledge, it was before it had been on any of the news. That he would have had knowledge before the news. And were you interested in what Mary Jacobs had to say? Oh yes. Okay. And what, was that tape recorded or videotaped, if you know? I don't know. I didn't, so I don't know if Kevin videotaped or audio recorded or not. Do you know if you took field notes? Me? Yes. I couldn't find any. I might actually have some. Okay. I'm curious. In a minute, I'm going to be showing some things. Okay. Murph said that they were not his field notes. Okay. I'm hoping that they're yours. That way, a mystery is solved in my world. Okay. Okay. So what was your takeaway with the Mary Jacobs interview? Mary was a nice lady. I didn't know that I 100% believed her on things. I definitely thought it should be looked into. She seemed truthful at the time. I'm not sure what I guess that from here, sure. What you're asking? Sure, and I'll get into more detail. Okay, here in a minute. Before I forget, what was your feelings on Kevin Murphy as an investigator? I didn't know Kevin Murphy before this, other than working at Notre Dame, walking around doing security. So I really didn't know any reputation or anything like that. I'd never read a report or anything like that. In your interaction with him, did you have any reason to suspect that he was no good at his job? No, I have no. All right. Okay, so now after Mary Jacobs was interviewed? Okay, and I think that's, from my knowledge, just because I'm going to be actually probably somewhat more of an expert on the flow of this than you are because I've been digging into it, right? So I'm going to ask you it this way. I think that happened, the interview that you and Murph had with Mary Jacobs, was in January of 2018. Does that sound correct? That sounds correct. But again, I can't give you an exact yes because, well, do you remember it being cold outside when you talked to? I don't remember that. Okay, and then I know that you mentioned a polygraph examination, and I believe that that was on February 1st of 2018. Yes. Okay, tell me, how did that get arranged and how did that all happen, the polygraph examination of Mary Jacobs? Before that, we went to see Mary Jacobs a second time. The second time, we had Aaron Campbell with us, and I believe the intention was to have Mary call Elvis and see if she could get Elvis to make some kind of admissions on the phone, and I don't think it went well. Mary kind of froze up, and she hadn't talked to Elvis, I believe, in ages, and it was just an awkward conversation. And I think Elvis eventually hung up on her. Okay? Was that interaction between Mary and Elvis tape recorded by somebody? Not by me. I'm not sure on the others. Okay, who else was there from law enforcement at this? Aaron Campbell and Kevin Murphy. Okay, is Aaron Campbell Aaron? I think so. Okay, so that's a male? Yes. I need to worry about, we make damn sure who these are after what happened this morning. Yeah, it's not ERIN, it's he works for the Drug Enforcement Section, okay, of the state police, okay? And so Aaron Campbell was there and Murph was there as well? Yes. Okay, so after that, so that had to, if my timeline is correct, and your first interview with Mary was early January of 2018, and the polygraph exam was February 1st, 2018, you believe sometime in the middle, sometime in between those two dates, sometime in January 2018, was the second interaction of Mary Jacobs? Yes. Okay. And? Second, I'm not sure about interview. I know that's when we decided to have her call Elvis. Okay. Fair enough. I'm not sure if she told her story over, or I don't recall. Thank you for saying that, because I do want to make sure that we're correct. And I inserted interview, and it wasn't perhaps an interview. Okay, so was it at that second interaction with Mary Jacobs, probably in January 2018, that the topic of the polygraph examination came up, or did that come up later? I don't know. Kevin, this was kind of Kevin's lead, and he was the one setting everything up. He set up the polygraph. I did go with him where we picked up Mary and took her to Indianapolis for the polygraph. Did the polygraph exam happen on 16th Street or someplace else? It's wherever their criminal investigation of the lab is downtown. That's the only time I've ever been there. Oh, okay. My experience is it's, right there on 16th Street, but I could be wrong. So what was the purpose or the goal of the polygraph examination of Mary Jacobs? Content hidden in original document removed by court rules. I want to show you, and I want to ask you questions about these things. So, okay, I believe those ones are mine. Let me do this. Defendant's Exhibit A was marked for identification. Before I do this and screw this up, I'm gonna move things around, okay? So I'm gonna move this over here, and we'll get to that in a second. The first thing I'm going to mark as Defendant's Exhibit A is something that was showed Murph when he was here last week or 2 weeks ago. It should be a 12 pages front and back document. Yes, are you familiar with that document? I was given it by Jerry Holman just Thursday. Okay, yeah, so you had a chance to review that document? Yes, okay, and so you're able to talk about it? Yes, content hidden per court access rules. Remember or don't remember to what I just quoted off of that. If you could read that first paragraph from the January 2018 interaction of Mary Jacobs by ISP troopers Murphy and Purdy. The question I'm going to ask is, what else, if anything, do you not remember? Other than that line, that's the only one I recall. Okay, that you don't recall. I don't recall, yes. But you do recall Elvis, Mary Jacobs saying that Elvis talked about having a brother and being part of a gang now? Yes. Okay. Now, even on February, I want to move on to the February 2018, the next paragraph down. You were not a part of this interview, is that correct? That's correct. Did you ever learn that Elvis had said to Murphy that if Elvis's spit is found on one of the girls but he could explain it away, would he still be in trouble? Had you heard that before? No. So the first time you heard of that was when you reviewed the document that Holman gave you last Thursday? That's correct. Okay. Elvis Field's cell phone. Do you know anything about Elvis Field's cell phone information? No. Okay. Interview of Elvis, June 20th of 2018 in Rushville PD. You weren't. It doesn't look like you were a part of that. It says interviewed by Ferenczi and Murphy. That's correct. Okay. You want me to go on then? A lot of this was completely news to me. I didn't know what Murphy or Ferenczi had been working on or anything. So, okay. Well, let's move ahead to the third page there. It's Abrams interviewed by... Okay. Rod Abrams interviewed by Murphy and Ferenczi on August 29th, 2018. Now, you're out of the picture by then, is that correct? Yes. And so I'm going to be calling on you more as an investigator, somebody that's done a lot of investigation in his life. And that's, even though you weren't involved in this interview, would you be concerned as an investigator that Rod Abrams' alibi doesn't really check out? Or do you even interpret it that way? I'm talking about Abrams' interview by Murphy and Ferenczi on August 29, 2018. I'm not sure of your. I'm gonna move on. Okay. Because it's a bad one. It doesn't make sense to me either as I'm sitting here thinking about it. At the bottom of page 3, Elvis Fields Brad Holder. Elvis mimicked various and numerous Facebook posts that are on Holder's Facebook page. Did you know that? No. Okay. Do you know whether Logan, at the bottom of that page and the top of page 4, do you know what? Whether Logan Holder was in school on the 13th of February? Did you know that? I don't know. I know the girls had a built-in day. I'm not sure. I probably did back then, but I don't know now. Fair enough. On page 4, Johnny Messer. You said that earlier you had not talked, you didn't know about Johnny Messer until Thursday? No. Reading this report was the first time I'd ever heard that name. Thank you. Then Taylor Hornaday is interviewed by Assistant Chief Todd Click of the Rushville Police Department. Did you ever meet Chief Todd Click? No, not to my knowledge. Okay. Did you ever interview Elvis? No. Okay. That helps because I think Elvis was interviewed February 28, 2017 at the Rushville Police Department. Okay. Does that ring a bell? No. Okay. On page 5, that's a long report, narrative report of interviewing Taylor Hornaday, the ex-girlfriend of Johnny Messer. I want you to put your investigative hat on, and I'm going to read you part of that and ask you what, if anything, you would have done in view of this. Taylor remembered that Messer and she were fighting on Valentine's Day 2017. The fight was due to the fact that Messer was up there with the Vinlanders around Valentine's Day, and he did not acknowledge the day or want to be around her that day. And if you knew that Johnny Messer was from Rushville, and up there was Delphi, would that pique your interest as an investigator? That this guy from Rushville was, according to his ex-girlfriend, up there, and Murph told us last week that up there was Delphi, he confirmed. Would that have any impact on you as an investigator? That's tough to say. I mean, I would have to know the whole picture, okay? I mean, there was a lot of people in Delphi on the 14th, so Johnny Messer is from Rushville. Did you see on the top of page 6 that they actually pulled off some tape recordings of Messer offering money to kill people? To have them injured or killed, and bragging about holding a suspect hostage and shooting them at his house? Do you remember reading that when you reviewed this document? I don't remember, but I read the document. So, it's at the top of page 6. Okay, and it's a little unfair, and I understand that, to ask you about things that you didn't get involved with, but I'm trying to understand the mind of an investigator, a seasoned investigator. So if you learned that Messer is from Rushville, but has friends who are named Brad Holder and Patrick Westfall up in Delphi and Logansport, does that pique your interest? Again, I would have to know the whole picture. All right, we'll continue on, especially, okay, that's a tough thing to answer. Sure. All right, we'll move on to the middle paragraph. Okay, of page 6, Taylor Hornaday is talking again. This is part of her memorialization talking to Murph. She does not recall if Messer came home before, on, or after February 14th. She did say that Messer was driving her 2001 Chevy Red Suburban. She recalls being even more angry with him because she noticed something like blood on the side of the vehicle. So I'm going to start giving the context for you because everything I'm going to say is accurate off of this report. So Messer, who knows Brad Holder and Patrick Westfall and is friends with them, is also from Rushville, 126 miles away, 2 hours away. He was up in Delphi around Valentine's Day. Taylor Hornaday let Messer, her then-boyfriend, borrow her car, and when he comes back, there's blood on the side of the vehicle, according to her. Now, with that context, are you interested in Johnny Messer and a full-on investigation of him? Again, without knowing all of I definitely would probably want to follow up. What happens if you also learn that Messer also knows Elvis Fields and Rod Abrams? Throw that into the context. So Messer, and he does. He knows Elvis, he knows Rod Abrams down here in Rushville, and he knows Patrick Westphal and Brad Holder up here in the Delphi area. And Elvis, you know, his sister at least has said that he basically admitted that he was involved in that crime somehow. How is that being processed by a seasoned investigator, that context? I almost think that each point would need to be broken down. Okay, all right, move on to page 9. Talking now to Amber Holder. This is a memorialization of Amber Holder's conversation with Murphy. And second paragraph, Amber stated that Brad refused to speak about Patrick Westphal. She had never met Patrick. She stated that Brad spoke of Patrick one time when he was intoxicated and said that he and Patrick got into a fight and they no longer speak to each other. He told her that he and Westphal were in the woods near a river conducting a ritual. One of them said or did something the other did not agree with, and they no longer talk to each other. What's a seasoned, and I know you weren't on this at that point in time, but what does a seasoned investigator at that moment in time think about that piece of information? Again, I would want more information. Are you interested though? I can tell you what, this is my opinion. Okay, I can tell you what the world would think. They would read that and they would think, that's crazy. That nobody would be, that even if there's a moderate amount of interest in that, there should be a major amount of interest in that. Why would a person with that thought process, just a regular Joe on the street, be wrong in thinking that way? Because I can tell you, the people that I shared that with, the people that I'm allowed to talk to, you know, the gag order, and so 100K into that based upon, I think I would look into anything anybody told me. I mean, I think the leads were followed up at Delphi. I mean, earlier you had talked about connection, and that's an important part of an investigator's job, trying to connect dots. Right. And I think as I'm reading all of this, I'm like, there's a giant group of connections here starting to form. Okay, and again, I totally understand this is unfair for you to be sitting over there, trying to look and it's uncomfortable probably because you're like, well, gosh, I don't want to be overlooking somebody else's investigation, right? I'll just move on. I'll just move on to the other stuff but okay. I do want to move on to page 10. Okay, it's right under second Amber Holder interview. I'm going to quote off of it. Mr. Rozzi, we didn't mark one. This is A. Mr. Rozzi. Oh. The witness, yeah, it's A. Defendant's Exhibit B was marked for identification. I'm going to do B here. Ask if you can review that. Put this one back? I think you can just leave it there, that's fine. Okay, thanks. This is, for the record, the polygraph exam that I think from February 1st, 2018. But I want you to review that and tell me when you're ready to talk about it. Witness complies. Okay, so you were at this polygraph examination, is that right? I was in the building. I was not in. I couldn't hear it as it was going on. She took her back into another room then. So, oh, okay. So when this polygraph was given, she had, to my knowledge, she had never mentioned Daniel Nations when we had interviewed before. And I thought that that was something that she just added to it just to try to make her look more truthful. Right. The other thing was she said he kept saying down the hill and chuckling. Yeah. If this would have happened before it was on the news, right, that wouldn't have been something that, I mean, Elvis wouldn't have known that that statement would have meant something, 3 months later. So I just kind of questioned whether maybe the timing of when I think she actually picked Elvis up. She thought, in my mind, what she was telling us she thought was truthful, but I questioned the time frame of when this actually occurred. I think, in my mind, it occurred actually after this had all been on the news, and I totally agree with you. That was my concern, and that's why it was important for me to locate things that tied him in to the crime scene or to Delphi, independently of what media was out there. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Is that you and I share the same concern. Right, yeah. And although Daniel Nations didn't have a perfect alibi, I'll say, I'm fairly certain he was not there, but I could be wrong, so I had the same issues. But then I read that he used sticks to give her horns. What would you as an investigator, getting back to that question, What might you do to determine whether or not that is an important detail that Mary Jacobs claimed Elvis said? Again, on the initial interview, I think it was more of he was burying her in the leaves, and I think Murphy said, and sticks, and she said, yeah, that he was burying sticks too. So, I kind of questioned. Again, Mary was a sweet lady and very fragile, and I think she wanted us to like her, and she wanted us, but I just kind of questioned. To content excluded per court access rules in original, porns in the Odinite religion. That I don't know. Defendant's Exhibit D was marked for identification. All right, I'm just going to give you, this is just off the internet on a simple Google search, Defendant's Exhibit D. When you did a Google search, did you see anything like this? I don't recall ever seeing this before. So do you recall seeing any Odinite photographs or images involving humans having horns on their head when you were doing a simple Google search of Odinism? I don't recall. Okay, all right. I'm next going to hand you, what is that, see? This is D. D, all right. Defendant's Exhibit E was marked for identification. I'm going to hand you E. This, for the record, is what we're calling our firm, the Winters Report, which you had nothing to do with. But if you'd take a second to review that, and I will ask you questions about that. Miss Macleod, do you have copies of any of these for me? Or Mr. Baldwin? Sure, you want to right now? Mr. Macleod? Sure. Would have been nice if I had them before the deposition, but Mr. Baldwin. Well, I remember for 30 years of doing this, I don't typically do that. Mr. Macleod, good for you. What about all these other exhibits you put in today? Mr. Baldwin, I will give you. I've got copies of all that stuff for you. Discussion off the record. Just tell me when you're ready. The witness, I'm ready. So Sergeant Holman told us last week that he had seen that these images that are described on the second page under this. The provided media pictures show unknown young girls, believed to be deceased, with sticks placed over their bodies, and it's from Holder's media accounts, depicting tree limbs on the ground, displaying runes consistent with the Odin belief system. The provided media pictures show unknown girls believed to be deceased, with sticks placed over their bodies. And that's the report. And I'm going to make this, what number are we at? The witness, I've got E. Mr. Razi, I think we're on F. Defendant's Exhibit F was marked for identification. F is on two sides. F is what was contained in the Dropbox that Holder in the Holder media account. On the other side is the crime scene. All right. So now if it's accurate that that was in a media account attributable to Brad Holder, that front side image, are you starting to become more interested in Brad Holder? My understanding is that photo that he had on his Facebook was from like 5 or 6 years earlier. I don't know if it's a common thing with the Vinlanders or the Odinists who do this kind of thing. So it wasn't like it was done after the girls had been killed. So you're not interested in it? I wouldn't say I'm not interested. I'm just saying that it wasn't like an immediate, that he did it right after the girls had been killed. When you were looking into Brad Holder for the period of time that you did you see that image somewhere on his Facebook page? Yes. Yes? Yes. The other, so the timing of it mattered to you, that it was so old? Is that what you're saying? I won't say necessarily the timing. Again, I think it's everything. We're looking who killed the girls, We're looking for someone and not necessarily what they're putting on Facebook. So, it's just one thing that we're looking at. Okay? It's a piece of the puzzle? Exactly. I'm going to hand you, Mr. Razi. This is the tree on the back of this. Just to be consistent, I'll give you this. I appreciate you letting me know that. Tell me when you've had a chance to look at it. Okay? Tell me when you're ready to talk about it. I'm ready. Okay? So we've talked about this already, and even Tony Portwood said that could be some type of bad Odin symbol. Is that correct? It could be a hand smear. But it could also be, I don't know about a bad Odin symbol. If it's the Fehu, it means cattle or wealth. And I don't know if that was a bad. I'm going to be right back. It'll take me 30 seconds. Go ahead and give him that next one. Did you do that yet? Mr. Razi, I gave him that one. That's the one he's holding. The witness, I've got this one too. And then there's this on the back. Mr. Baldwin, yes. What's that one marked? No, Ansus, and F is Odin. Hail Odin. Have you ever heard that? No. Hail on the girls. Odin on the tree. That's not been talked about? No. All right, so we're looking at the side-by-side. Do you see a similarity between the side-by-side on the tree, the red on the tree, and the sticks on the ground? Similarities. I mean the picture. I mean, this is probably a better picture, but they both look like possibly an F. There's no line going across here. On the bottom line of the F? No. Yeah. And I'm representing to you, I believe accurately, that the F in stick form on the ground was on Brad Holder's Facebook page. Does that look familiar to you? Yes. Does the fact that there are sticks on the ground that form an F and there's an F, well, what appears like it could be an F on the court rules? So, if you don't mind, I'm going to come around and mark those K and L. Okay, so I'm marking out the K and putting an L next to it. I'm marking out the J. I've got a J here. So it would be K and L. Defendant's Exhibit K was marked for identification. Defendant's Exhibit L was marked for identification. So I'm handing you now on the hard sticker K and L. Okay, tell me when you're ready to talk about those. Okay, so you know what those are, K and L? Pictures. I've never seen them before. Okay, those were on Brad Holder's Facebook page. Okay, from February of 2018. So you didn't start investigating Brad Holder until May or June of 2018. Did you see that image represented by J and K that you're holding right now? Did you see that image on Brad Holder's Facebook page? I don't recall seeing it. And it's K and L. K and L. Thank you. All right, is there anything of note there that you look at what's represented by K and L as an investigator, where you might think, huh, that's interesting. That's something that might cause me to look at Brad Holder as a suspect? I will also represent to you that Brad represents that. Brad Holder represents that that is a painting that he painted. Okay, in February 2018. Is there anything about those images of K and L as an investigator that would cause you some intrigue? I mean, it's a disturbing photo or disturbing picture, but I don't know that I can really determine that. I mean, I think as I looked at the internet, there was a lot of people with disturbing photos on their Facebook. What about at the bottom? It took me a while to figure this out. Actually, Ryan Boucher down in Georgia is the one that pointed things. It's even an accurate alibi. Do you think that alibi is legit? I'm sorry, can you repeat that question? Sure. Even if Brad Holder's alibi is legit, knowing that Mary Jacobs claims that her brother told her that when he was up doing whatever he was doing, that he now had brothers and was part of a gang, does that cause you as an investigator to think maybe Holder, even if he had an alibi, was kind of the ringleader and had other people doing his business for him? Maybe he's smart enough, Holder is, to actually get an alibi so that he doesn't have this pinned on him. Do you think that's a crazy thought on my part? I think it could be looked into. Yes, as far as the alibi is concerned, that's not on you because you didn't. You came in way later, and they first talked to him on February 17th. But how far is it from Buffalo, Indiana to Delphi? I'd have to look that up. About 45 minutes? Yeah, it was a distance. Could have been there by 3:30 p.m., but he says he was at. Brad Holder said he was at a gym in Logansport. Do you know if that was looked into? Whether he was at a gym in Logansport? That I don't know. Are you familiar with the sketches L and 2 that were released to the public? Yes, thank you. And I'm going to hand you N. Are you familiar with those two sketches? Yes. Do you know who Sarah Carbaugh is? Yes. Do you know who Betsy Blair is? Yes. Okay. Do you know which one of those is the Sarah Carbaugh sketch? Yes. The one on the left here. Sketch 2? Sketch M. Did you have anything to do with decision-making on when those sketches were released, or which ones were released? No. Is it your understanding that Sketch 1 and Sketch 2 are supposed to be Richard Allen? It's not my understanding, no. What is your understanding? It's just these were sketches done by possible witnesses. If Jerry Holman has said that both of those sketches are supposed to be Richard Allen, okay, he said that last week. Do you think that either one of those look like Richard Allen? I have not seen Richard Allen, so fair enough. Do they look? Those are Exhibits M and N. Is that right? Yes. Do Exhibit N and Exhibit N look like each other? No. That's very clear? Yes. But I also thought that there's more than one person involved too. Well, Jerry Holman said that those two they look similar to him. Do you think they look similar to you? They don't look similar to me. Do you know who Teresa Liebert is? No. I have a guess, but no. Her husband was one of the suspects. I'm going to hand you O. I'm going to represent to you that Teresa Liebert is on the Weber side of the High Bridge. Do you know what I mean? Yes. Okay. Where the famous video was taken, right? Yes. And Teresa Liebert saw somebody before noon on February 13th, and that's the sketch that came from that. I'm going to represent that to you. Okay? Okay. Redacted portions removed as in original. In O and P is a closer similarity than to sketch 1 and sketch 2 are to each other? Yes. Teresa Liebert believes, I've talked to her. She believes that the person she saw that morning on that end of the High Bridge where the girls were, where the famous video allegedly came from, that she thinks that that person that she saw was headed toward the High Bridge and might have been below the High Bridge while somebody else was on the bridge, forcing those girls down the rest of the bridge. What do you think of that theory? Do you have any thoughts on that? I don't have any thoughts on that. Looking at Elvis Fields from 2 hours away in Rushville, Indiana. Here's what we now know, and I just want your thoughts on this. You have to trust me on some of it because you know, you weren't involved in Johnny Messer, for example. There are 6 ways that Elvis Fields is tied into the crime scene or to Delphi. I've shared with you some of them. Some of them you may not agree with, like the horn that he says he formed sticks into horns, and we have this photograph. Johnny Messer is a friend of his, and he's also a friend of Brad Holder's. Johnny Messer had blood on his vehicle from being up in Delphi the 13th and the 14th, according to his girlfriend. Elvis Fields says, I'm part of a gang. I have brothers. And then there's the Teresa Liebert sketch, which would be another potential indicator that Elvis might have been up there. Having said all that, do you think it is worth reopening an investigation into Elvis Fields and to Brad Holder based upon everything you've seen today? Well, that wouldn't be my decision to make, first off. Sure. And I'm not sure about some of Elvis's statements because they're coming from Mary Jacobs, and I don't know how much I believed of Mary Jacobs. So that's a tough, I don't know if you mentioned blood on the side of a car. Was that car ever found, and was blood found to be on the car, and was it from the girls? We had a lot of leads of people like that. I mean, you win in some cases as detectives with some redacted in original. I'm going to hand you R. Can you identify what R is for me? It says Holder, 2/17/2017 Facebook post, later deleted from his account. Have you ever seen that before? What's depicted in Defendant's Exhibit R? No, I have never seen this before. Could you read that out loud for me? Your real ones don't judge you. Your real ones don't judge you or ask a bunch of questions. They help you move the body and never speak of it again. What's the date of that post? May 15th. Okay. Down at the bottom, it looks like he shared it on February 17th. February 17, 2017. What happened on that date? The girls were abducted, right? On February 17th? Right. I'm wrong on that. It was 3 days later. 3 days after the girls were murdered, Brad Holder puts that Facebook post out and then deletes it. Does that cause you any thoughts on whether Brad Holder should be investigated and reopened as a suspect? Again, that's a tough. If Brad Holder put this out on his Facebook and the girls were just killed, I'd probably take it off my Facebook too, because it would make it look bad. So I don't know what his thinking was. What about the thinking to put it on in the first place on February 17th, 3 days after the girls were dead? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not trying to be smart here. I'm really not, man. I'm bothered. I'm bothered by all this. But I'm not sure what was going through Brad Holder's head. You know why I would think that if Brad Holder killed the girls, he wouldn't want to put anything that looked like an Odinist on the crime scene because it would point right back to him. Getting into the mentality of somebody that would kill girls like that in a sacrificial way. The U.S. Marshal's report said that there was no report, no record of sacrifice amongst redacted in original. Yes, it looks like it was cut. So then go back to Patrick Westfall's S, and I want you to read what is going on in that Facebook post. Cutting runes. Who's saying that? Brad Holder, okay? And what is Patrick Westfall doing there? He's got a saw, and then looks like he's cutting something. I would say that they're sticks. Okay, all right. Well, now we've got this whole new thing going on. If that is a stick that has been cut clean using a saw of some type, Does that, as an investigator, cause you any thoughts of, I wonder if they brought their own sticks to the scene, or if they had an organization so organized that they had saws there at the scene. And if I look at this Patrick Westphal image, maybe it came from him. The guy who Brad Holder told his ex-wife, Amber Holder, was responsible for killing those girls. So my question is, what about Patrick Westphal? According to Amber Holder, that caused their friendship to end. I would just think that an investigator would be salivating over that alone, let alone everything else that I've provided you today. Are you salivating over the possibility that Brad Holder and Patrick Westphal were too quickly eliminated as suspects? And again, I don't know what the whole picture is. That's probably more of a question for Jerry Holman or the prosecutor here, because I don't know what follow-up would have been done. I'm assuming some type of, you have somebody who says that, yeah, Brad told me he did it. I'm assuming there would have been some type of follow-up. Same way with, you mentioned the blood on the one person's car door. I'm assuming there would have been some wanting to check and see if there was actually blood on the car door. Try to verify details. So I can't answer. Sure. Sorry. You're good. Again, for the millionth time, I recognize how unfair this is. I'm just telling you, this is where I'm so transparent. I'm giving Nick a lot of our ammunition out of the hopes that somebody is going to do what wasn't done apparently, or somebody that explains to me why this stuff wasn't done. That's why we are doing this. We could spring this up at trial, but we're not doing that. I mean, if you were asked to continue to work on this case, would you be willing to do that? Coming into this, I was not a homicide investigator. This was actually the first homicide I'd ever worked on from an investigation standpoint. I would definitely think I would want more experience looking back. Fair enough? Where are we? We are at S, so this will be T. This is the handwritten notes that I'm trying to figure out that Murph said were not his. I'm going to ask you, I think there's not a date on here, but I believe this was from the January 2018 interview with Mary Jacobs. I'm hoping you can tell me whose notes those are, whose handwriting. They would not be mine. Do they look familiar to you? No. I'm gonna include that in there. I'm sorry, I don't have a copy of that. I'm just trying to figure out whose notes those are. Okay. All right. I'll hand you now. I have some of these, but not all of them. Single color photo of Elvis's brass knuckles I do not have. But that's what U is. Does that look familiar to you? No. I'll represent to you that that is what was given to us in Discovery and represented on Elvis Field's Facebook page. Now I'm going to hand you V, and this is right out of the Discovery that was given to us. Talking about connections. I believe it was Ferenczi that put this together, but I could be wrong. I'm trying to figure that out. Mimicking. Brad Holder and Elvis Fields mimicking each other on Facebook. If that is accurate, that's an unusual thing. Brass knuckles surrounded by different weapons. Would that be useful in trying to determine whether there's a connection between Elvis Fields and Brad Holder? This document. Yes. No. Why not? It's a picture. I mean, each of them have brass knuckles in the picture. There's knives, and this one's got a gun. That might just be a giant coincidence? Well, I mean, you asked my opinion. Sure. That's what I want. So I would say just because they both own brass knuckles, I wouldn't necessarily. Those are both posted on their Facebook page, though. Okay, so does that make a difference? Not that they own them, but they actually each posted those different images on their Facebook page. Would that make a difference to you? I'm sorry, I didn't explain that very well. That's on their Facebook page, and again, I would say no. I find it a stretch that, maybe if Brad Holder had the brass knuckles in the middle and he put knives around it, then I'd say, okay, they both did the same, But just both having brass knuckles on a Facebook page. I don't know that. We could probably find a lot of people that have. What happens if Elvis Fields has admitted that Brad Holder was following him, and he was following Brad Holder on Facebook? Would that make a difference to you? As far as them knowing each other? Make a difference in how? Would that be less coincidental to you, potentially, that they are following each other on Facebook and mimicking if Elvis has admitted that that's what's going on? I don't know. I guess the intention, What does that even mean, to mimic a picture of brass knuckles? I'm not real sure. So Elvis lives in Rushville, Indiana, 2 hours away from Delphi. Brad Holder lives in Logansport, very close to Delphi. They're posting similar things on Facebook. And if I tell you that Elvis would testify, if he would, that Brad Holder was following him on Facebook, and that's how those images came to be. As an investigator, please tell me that that would be of interest to you. I think you know that he's following him on Facebook. I mean, what does that even mean? I mean, I follow Brad Holder on Facebook. I'm not sure putting brass knuckles on a Facebook page is, the girls weren't hit with, to my knowledge, with brass knuckles. I don't know how either one of those pictures maybe points to who killed the girls. I guess I'm Elvis Fields. I tell my sister I'm now part of a gang. I've got brothers. I have this common friend named Johnny Messer that's great friends with Brad Holder and Patrick Westfall. I'm following Brad Holder on Facebook, and I'm mimicking him. I asked a question of Murphy about if I spit on the girls and it comes up, but I have a good reason for that to happen. Will I still be in trouble? Are none of these? I'm just astounded, and I know it's unfair to you, but I'm gonna tell you something. This is not the way the world is gonna view this case. Do you understand that? Yes. Okay. And if I'm accurate and the world is not gonna view it that way, how would it be that an investigator seems to be so disinterested in the possibility that Brad Holder and Patrick Westfall and Elvis Fields are all involved in this? That's what I'm trying to understand with my heart. I'm saying that with my heart. Are you asking if I'm disinterested in the case? Is that what you're asking? I'm asking if you're disinterested with all of this stuff that you did know and most of it you did not know. Aren't you going to walk away from here and say, oh my God, this looks like there was a dropped ball here. There is lots of connections here between Elvis Fields and Brad Holder putting stuff on his Facebook about stuff that was at the crime scene that nobody else knows about. All of that. Aren't you walking away saying, yeah, something needs to happen here. They need to investigate this. Is that how you're going to walk out of this meeting? But I'm going to walk out of this, I guess, with confidence in my department, that if this is as you say, like I said with the car door, that they would have followed up to see if there was maybe blood on a car door. It would have gone further and things that they could have checked into to verify. I don't know that I'm going to leave here thinking this case is doomed, so to speak, because nobody's looking into this. I'm assuming, that I don't care if the case is doomed for Richard Allen. I care about the truth coming out. That's what I care about. If Richard Allen did this, then let everybody prove that. But I've been disconnected from this case since probably March of 2018. I really can't speak on what's been done since or what background has been done other than what I've been given to access here. And with all due respect, and I mean that sincerely, because I know I'm putting you in a tough spot, and I mean that sincerely. I really do, because it is unfair for the millionth time, but you're coming off as a guy that's trying to protect the state police. That's what you're coming off as to me. And I think that's how it's going to come off to a jury. Honestly. Okay, do you think that I'm incorrect there? I think the jury's going to get all this stuff. I mean, if you think I'm trying to protect the state police, you're incorrect. I just can't answer for what I don't know. That I understand. But I was hoping that what we would get is that, wow, when I showed this stuff to Murphy, that was his reaction. Wow. Was Brad Holder ever given a search warrant? I don't know. Not to my knowledge. I don't know after I left. Here's what the evidence they had on Richard Allen before they got a search warrant for his house. They claimed that he was at the scene around the time the girls were killed or abducted. He has a blue jacket, had a blue jacket. He owned guns and knives. That's about it. There isn't a whole lot more than that. His car? There's some evidence that his car might have been in the vicinity at the time. This is what they had on Elvis. This is what they had on Patrick Westfall. This is what they had on Brad Holder. With all of this evidence, should they have asked for a probable cause affidavit for search warrants for Brad Holder? And that's not for me to decide. That would be for the prosecutor to decide. Okay, I understand. Liggett asked. He's the one that asked for the search warrant. So officers do make those determinations. Okay, well, let me go through because I don't know these answers. Do you know if there was a search warrant request for Brad Holder? I don't know. Do you know if there was a search warrant request for Patrick Westfall? I don't know. Do you know if there was a search warrant request for Elvis Fields? I'm trying to think. There was for his blood. No, he agreed to his blood. I don't know. I know when they were going down to Rushville, there was a thought that the trailer where he was staying at. I don't know if there was ever a request for a search warrant, so I'm not 100% sure on that. Fair enough. Do you know if there was ever a search warrant for Rod Abrams? Not to my knowledge. I won't even get into that. But Rod Abrams claimed that on February 13th, he was up at Muncie at a hospital and gave some bogus answer. And he also claimed that who was with him? Elvis Fields. And Elvis Fields claims, no, I was in Rushville. Does that cause you any concern when alibis are, aren't consistent with one another? Does that cause you concern as an investigation? It does. But you gotta remember too that we're interviewing people like a year or two later. I couldn't tell you where I was February 17th of last year or February 13th of last year. I might have a good guess. The fact that that's a good point actually. The fact that Rod Abrams was willing to even provide an alibi for that day would mean that he was kind of aware of that day. Just a thought that entered into my brain. Okay, how did you end up not working on this case anymore? My FBI credentials came through. Okay, so I went back to work. Were you ever told to not work on this case? No. Were horns as described by Elvis had formed sticks into horns? A topic of discussion for anybody in Unified Command or any law enforcement officer that you know? Not that I know of. Did it ever seem to you that Tony Liggett was interested in the Odinite angle to this case once you got on in March of 2017? I don't know. I don't know that I had a lot of conversations with Tony Liggett, so I don't know. What about Jerry Holman? Did Jerry seem interested in the Odinite angle when you came aboard the investigation in March of 2017? Jerry Holman wanted to solve the case, so I think Jerry Holman was willing to look at whatever angles. But I want to specifically talk about the angle, the Odinite angle, because you've also said that, Brad Holder, for example, was cleared early on when you started, right? Yes. So with that in mind, was Jerry Holman specifically interested at all in the Odinite angle when you came aboard? When I came aboard, as in March of 2018, 17, you're right. I don't know. I don't know what was going on. Is it fair to say that at a minimum Jerry Holman was not going up to you and saying, man, there seems like a lot of connections going on here? Even at any point in time while you were on it from March of 2017 to, what did you say? March of 2018? Yes, at any time during that year that you were on this case, did Jerry Holman ever come up to you and say, man, there are a lot of connections between this Odinite angle and Brad Holder and even those guys down in Rushville, Elvis Fields? Man, I think this is where it's at. You need to really buckle down and investigate that. Was there any conversation even remotely like that with Jerry Holman? No. What about Jay Harper? Did you know Jay Harper? Yeah. Did he have any interest at all in the Odinite angle? From what you can remember during the year that you were on this case? I don't remember specific conversations. I think we would tell Jerry what we were looking into, but I don't remember specific conversations. Have you ever had a belief that anyone is trying to bury the Odin angle for some reason in law enforcement? Redacted block omitted as in original. In March of 2017? Yes. So basically, you could get in there and look at whatever you wanted to look at that everybody else had access to as far as you knew? Not so much the computer. There were file cabinets if you needed to look up a person in the file cabinets. I think the reports were being printed out, and so, okay. And if I understood you correctly, at some point somebody was able to kind of stop that, or they were able to click a box and limit your access, right? Yes, I believe. And did you think that that was Holman in this particular case that was doing that? I thought. Maybe you mentioned him, but Holman, is who I called to get access to the reports to prepare for this. I'm not sure who shut. I was just going to say, I'm not sure who, once I left, who stopped the access. So there became a point in time when you no longer had access? Yes, I think you said earlier that maybe you were getting on to look at something and you discovered you couldn't access the file? That might have been an explanation as to how you learned that, right? And that could be. I think they called me one time about a report, and so I got on there to see if I could find it and couldn't get on the report. Was the way this file was managed in terms of access, was it different than in a normal case? I mean, you were able to access it at one point and the next point you weren't. You say a normal case. There are cases, high-profile people, that type of thing that maybe access is denied where they don't want everybody getting on the case report and looking at it. I remember one thing they had was people all over the state getting on, wanting to see what was going on in Delphi and reading reports. Internally? Yeah. So I think they wanted to, that was the rumor going around. So they wanted to, at one point, I think crime scene photos were on the case report. I was just getting ready to ask you that. So at some point early on in this investigation, let's talk about the first month or two. Do you think you were able to access crime scene photographs? If I was, I never saw any. But you heard that that was the case? I heard that, at one point, that they were on there, yes. Did you have any reason to believe after you conducted this investigation that any of these people associated down, let's say in Rushville, just kind of talk about the whole clan, if you will, that they might have had any access to that information? I would have no knowledge. I don't know how they would. I mean, that would be kind of a stretch to assume that, right? Right. Was there any point in time? Have you ever heard the phrase scene integrity, crime scene integrity? Yes. Do you know what that means in the law enforcement business? I mean scene integrity as far as the crime scene area, not allowing people in it to taint the evidence. Do you believe in this case, based on your involvement in the investigation, that there was scene integrity maintained here? As far as the actual crime scene? Yes. I don't know. I wasn't there. I didn't start until later. So I'm not real sure. Did you ever run across any information in the course of your investigation, like, ooh, we've got a leak or we've got a problem here internally? I never ran across that. No. Do you ever recall any discussions between you and anyone else involved in the case that that was a concern? Crime scene integrity? No, not that I know of. I can't recall any. I'm going to ask you these questions. Forgive me if he covered them, but I don't think he did entirely. Jim Burkhart? Yes. Is with the ISP? Yes. Do you know where Jim is, Trooper Burkhart is these days? Low post. And Al Martinez, same question. He's a task force officer. He's out of Fort Wayne FBI office. He's a state trooper out of Fort Wayne. Did you talk to either one of them before you came down here? No. Did Jerry Holman or anyone else involved in this investigation ever communicate to you that they had anyone other than Purdue take a look at the crime scene as it related to this, I'll call it, this hate crime? Jerry Holman or the second in command, Harper? Not Harper. We don't really know. No. He's the sergeant over there, second in command of investigations. The guy you were talking about earlier? Yeah. I don't know if it was him or Jerry said that Purdue University said that they could send the photos to somebody in Germany who might be better off telling them, and I don't know if that was ever done. Are you aware of any other information that was generated in this investigation regarding this Odinite angle by an independent source? Other than the Purdue report, I'll call it. I'm trying to think if the Beverly Shores. I can't remember if she gave us a report or not. Do you remember anybody else offering you up or you receiving information from any other source other than those two places, possibly? I don't recall any other. There was let me think. No, not that I can recall. There were some questions about Anthony Portwood. Do you recall those questions? Yes. I'm gonna get a little loose with my terms here. You're fine. Is it your impression that Anthony Portwood practices some form of Odinism? I don't know if that's the right word. Adheres to some form of Odinism? Yes. Are you aware of whether or not Anthony Portwood has ever, I'll say, done any talks or seminars or lectures as it relates to that? Or is that just a coincidence in this case and he happened to be… No, I don't think he does talks. I think he had found out that we were looking into the Odinists and wanted to know if he could help in some way. So he came forward? He came forward. Because I didn't know before that he was an Odinist. I knew him before, but I didn't know that he had practiced. I didn't know him that well. You worked this angle. That's why we're sitting here today. Right. Yeah. What do you think it means practically that he is engaged in that practice? What does that mean to you now that you've worked on this? I think from the religious standpoint, is it a religious group in your mind? I respect Tony Portwood. I don't know anything about his personal life, as far as what the practice looks like that his family does. So, I really can't say. You never asked him like, hey, what do you do on Saturdays and Sundays? No. When you're engaged in these type activities? No. So you don't know? I have no idea. There were some questions posed to you about Brad Holder and his alibi. Do you recall those questions that Andy asked you earlier? Okay. There was talk about weight rooms, and I think you guys referred to as new. Buffalo, Indiana. Yes. Does that sound more accurate? Yes. New Buffalo is where the casino is up in Michigan, right? Okay. Yeah. With regard to Brad Holder, did you personally ever vet his alibi? As far as go there and witness I guess, did you ever review any information regarding his alibi whatsoever? I went to his workplace, but it was substantially later, just to find out for sure that he was not working that day or that he was working that day. And they had cameras, but of course the camera was one of those that 60 days records over itself? Exactly. So you were not personally ever able to, I'll say, cover or clear his alibi. Correct. And to the extent that you were trying to clear or cover his alibi, for what period of time were you attempting to do that? I guess you're referring to Brad Holder? Yeah, on February 13th. How I was trying to clear whether, I read the report. I'm not sure the date that I would have gone to his workplace. Let me ask it a different way. When you went and tried to clear his alibi, were you looking for evidence that he was at work between, let's just say, 12 p.m. and 3 p.m. on February 13th of 2017, generally that time frame? Yeah, I don't recall. I don't recall what questions I was looking, what specifically I was looking for when I went. If you found out that his alibi was that he was never cleared from that standpoint, would that have changed the context of your entire investigation? Possibly. Because I've heard today a number of occasions where you said, well, I thought he was cleared, right? Right. That's fair? Right. I think you said that at least 3 or 4 times. If it turns out that he wasn't cleared for that time frame, might that have changed the way you view all of this stuff that you're seeing now? Again, I'm not a homicide investigator, so I probably would have taken it to Jerry Holman or whatever to find out for sure what avenues, if they wanted me to. Go, what direction? It's possible there could have just been a mistake in vetting his alibi, right? Possible. Or it was the wrong time. Maybe the alibi should have been focused more on the hours of 3 and 10 p.m., let's say, right? Right. But I get the impression that you kind of walked through this investigation. I don't mean that in an insensitive way. That you conducted your investigation basically with the idea that Brad Holder had been cleared early on in the case. It drove what you did in this case? I won't say that it drove what I did, but I thought he had been cleared. So you may have done less or vetted some things less than you might have otherwise if he was still on the hot seat, so to speak. Again, I probably would have spoken with Jerry Holman. If we wanted Jerry Holman and Jay Harper in the Unified Command, they were the ones more or less in charge. I wasn't part of that. I would have gone to them and spoke about it. You don't recall doing that. So, he had new brothers or was involved in a gang. Maybe I'm misunderstanding time frame here. You're suggesting, correct me if I'm wrong, you're suggesting that whatever information her brother told her was information that would not have been acquired from the media? According to her, yes. Were you able to figure out the time frame of the release of this information or the exchange of it from Elvis Fields to his sister? What she claimed was like the next day, but there was no way of proving that. My thought was that, she was giving us information that Elvis told her maybe at a later time. Okay, but she did pass a polygraph? Yes. So to a certain extent, it helped corroborate what she was saying to the best of your ability at least? It corroborated that what she gave the polygraph operator was true to her knowledge. We've talked a little bit about polygraphs. You guys use those pretty routinely in your... Yeah, the state police uses polygraphs. Did you use them back when you were working at one of the posts? Once in a while. You usually rely on the results of those things. They're a good tool. They show what the person believes to have happened, but not necessarily. You have to verify what actually happened. But you acknowledge that you use those in court. Prosecutors use them in court? Stipulated ones, yeah. And you're comfortable with that process? I don't know enough about the polygraph, so I'm comfortable enough to get the results and rely on the operator who's more knowledgeable about it than I am. You ever forwarded those in the course of an investigation and suggest that somebody either be arrested or charged? I work financial crimes and I can't recall. I have not polygraphed too many people in my career. You said you spoke with Jerry Holman about, I think you said, about a week ago maybe it was? Yeah, I'll say last week. It was on Sunday, because it was at the racetrack, because we had to work the brickyard. Oh, there was a race this Sunday? Yeah. Was that just coincidence that you guys talked at the racetrack on Sunday? Or was that planned? Hey, we're both going to be in the same airspace. He contacted my supervisor and said bring me over at some point and that we would talk about. So it was planned? Yeah. Not ahead of time, but that day he said if I was at the race to come over. You said he talked to you about the report that's marked as Exhibit A, the 12-page. Not at that time. Field notes? No. He more or less told me that I was going to be deposed. When did he talk to you about those field notes? I called him as soon as I got the subpoena just to find out if I could get access to reports at that point. At that point, I don't think I had access to the case reports at all, and he said he would send me a copy of this, and he did. That report he specifically talked about? Not at the race. In the phone conversation? On Thursday. Yeah, he said he would send it. What did he say? Just that. I'll send you Murphy's notes, and I don't know how much you were involved with the investigation on Elvis Fields. I'll send them to you. Did he say anything about what we had talked to him about? No. Like, did he suggest to you at any point in time that he wasn't aware that those even existed until we showed him? No, I didn't know that. No. I'm asking, did he suggest to you on the phone at any point in time that he was not aware of the existence of those until we brought them to his attention? No. Earlier, Andy asked you about those sketches. M and N are actually what they are, right? Okay, yeah. One is being murdered. You would think that there would be, I don't know, some kind of struggle. I mean, I just assume there's more than one person involved. You still feel pretty comfortable about that today? That's what you do for a living. I think it's a fair question, right? I guess, yeah. I think that's a good possibility. And that possibility is, at least aligns to a certain extent with some of the stuff we're offering up today, that there could be more than one person involved? Could be. Let me hand you. This will be why. Sorry. Thanks. Let me hand you what's been marked as Defendant's Y. I think that's one of the slides that was offered up as it relates to, let's just call it loosely, the Brad Holder file. Is that fair? Yes. And so my view of that is, my kind of layperson's view is, at some point. The date on there appears to be, I want to say 4 or 5 months prior to these crimes. There was a photo uploaded to Brad Holder's site. Is that right? I'm assuming these were on his Facebook. I'm just not sure on that part. You don't know? I know I've seen this picture. I'm just not sure where I've seen it. Oh yeah, it's Brad Holder right there. So this reference to Vinlanders, does that in any way, in your mind, is it affiliated or associated with this Odinism that we're talking about? Yes. What in your mind is the affiliation? I think it's a group based out of Indianapolis of Odinists. Like a subsect? Yeah, subcult. You said a group from Indianapolis? Yeah. So looking at this, do you know which one is McGinney? I mean, I have my suspicions, but do you know which one is McGinney? Which one is Holder, Messer, and Westfall? I don't know this one or this one. This one is Holder, and that one is Westfall. So there's a guy here on the left. The first one from the left, if we're going left to right, yes. Number 2 would be Holder. And number 4 would be Westfall. And you're not familiar. You don't know what Johnny Messer looks like? Right. No. Does the guy in image number 2, the second one from the left, which you say is Brad Holder, look similar to? There's some similarities between Defendant's Exhibit N and Mr. Holder? Yep. And then same question about, in fairness, I'm going to ask you the same question about number 4 here. Yes. Westfall? Yes. Is it fair to say even the other two guys there might be some similarities? Yes, much more so than in defendant's end, right? Yes, more so. I also noticed here in the first human here from the left, which presumably is McGinney. He's holding what appears to me to be a horn. Is that a fair assessment? Yes. Did that ever catch your eye or raise any suspicions or concerns with you at any point? I don't recall it raising at this point. No. I would ask you all the same questions that Andy did. Does it concern you, or does that pique your interest? Is your answer going to be the same as it is with all this other? It will be the same. I would want the total picture. Do you feel like? And again, I would want to take this to someone that investigates homicides and let them make that final decision as well. I don't have. I'm not a trained homicide investigator. This was just a question that popped in my mind, actually totally associated entirely with another case that I was involved in 20 years ago. Do you know if they retained as evidence the sticks from the crime scene? I don't know. You've never apparently, I've never seen them. No. Bothered to look at them? I mean, not bothered, but you've never attempted to? No. I would assume, but I don't know. Was there any discussion between you and Jerry Holman about you doing any further work on this case? No. You mean like even now? Yeah. No. Beyond the deposition? No. Like we gotta put our boots back on? No. I live on the other side of the state, and this was a 2.5-hour drive, so… Andy asked you some questions earlier about when you stopped working on this case, right? Yes. And your answer was, well, when I got my credentials? Yes. Did someone ask you to stop working on the case? I don't know if the FBI maybe said that his credentials are here. It was always known that I was on loan to work cases. So when my credentials came up, it was a good point. It was time to close. I know that once I went back to, at the time I was working out of the Fort Wayne office, the FBI office. I know I went with Fort Wayne Police Department to a search warrant, and they interviewed somebody involving the Delphi case. I went with them on that as well. So, I mean, I was still working on leads when they would come in my way. Do you know why the FBI were no longer involved? Why their involvement ceased? As far as with me? No. With this case, that I don't know. I mean, you're working with some of these people. I assume they were still involved. I didn't know that they were no longer there. I don't have any further questions. Couple, very short. In talking to Mary Jacobs, did you determine whether when was the first time that Mary Jacobs, had attempted to talk to anybody about what Elvis had told her? That, I don't know. I read somewhere that she had gone up fairly early and drove up with her husband all the way to Delphi and talked to some folks, or tried to. Okay, does that ring a bell at all? It doesn't. Like I said, Kevin Murphy would have been the one that would have gotten this tip. Based upon your knowledge of how the tip structure was, the tip hotline was structured, and people just walked in and walked up to Delphi? Did you have any knowledge of like where would they go, or who they would talk to, and what would have been done after that? I think early on, as tips were coming in, they had a group of, I think they were dispatchers or office workers, that were there trying to keep things sorted out. As time went on, I think it came through Unified Command, or there was, I don't know if the FBI had a tip line, or the state police might have had a tip line where these came in. That I don't know. You may not know the answer to this, but I'm just trying to figure out if I wanted to find out if it's true and accurate that Mary Jacobs did come up. I think it's in a report somewhere that she did come up, or she says that she came up to Delphi to come in person and say what she knew about what Elvis had told her. Closer in time, perhaps even before that stuff was out in the media. Do you know where I would go to find that? I would check with Jerry Holman. Yeah, he could direct you. Did Unified Command have any opinion on the number of people that were involved in the actual murder of these girls? That I don't know. Did you ever talk to Jerry Holman about that? How many people were involved? No. Or Tony Liggett? No. Kevin Murphy, having been duly sworn to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth relating to said matter, was examined and testified as follows. Direct examination questions by Mr. Baldwin. State your name for the record. Kevin Murphy. What would you like me to call you? Murph. Murph? Kevin? Yeah. Seems like Murph should be something that your good friends call you. I'll go with Kevin, sure. 'Cause I don't know you that well. Kevin, what are you doing for a living right now? I just heard you retired. I'm a sergeant at a police department on Lake Michigan called Beverly Shores. It's right next to Michigan City. You were in the state police, is that right? June of 95 through July of 21. I retired July 7th of 21, and I came down around the 17th, 18th of February. So it would have been a couple days after the girls were killed. Okay, and how was it decided what you were going to do, and who decided that? Kevin Hammond and Tony Liggett at the Old Town Hall were in charge of processing all tips. They called them leads, and every day just went out and followed these leads, these tips. It seems to me, and maybe I'm wrong, but you kinda were one of the main guys on what I would call the Odin investigation. Investigation into the Odin angle to the crime scene. I was part of that, yes. Who else was involved in that? Roland Purdy, who I believe is still a state trooper, and then we had a sergeant out of Indianapolis, Tony Portwood. He was the official of what Odinism is, might be a member, was very familiar with it. He came down to the command center, which is the old NIPSCO building, and gave a presentation just on Odinism because I didn't know what it was. Tony Portwood? Portwood, yes, that's a new name. Anthony Portwood, state police. He's actually a state police. I believe he's still with the department, sir. Oh, okay. And you said he might even be an Odinist? Yes. And what did he say about Odinism? What kind of things did you learn? Talked about the aspects of it being a somewhat informal religion or informal faith. And I had read about it, but didn't really understand it. It seemed to me to border on almost a satanic type of worshiping, sacrificing, but I couldn't really wrap my mind around what it was or how it applied to anything that we were doing. Did he talk about runes? No. Are you familiar with that term runes, ruins? Runes, R-U-N-E-S. No. Some would say they're the symbols. Oh yes. Okay. I don't know symbols, but yes, symbols. So runes, that doesn't ring a bell, but the symbols, yes. Of Odinism? Why was Odinism even originally thought to be in play based upon the crime scene? Something to do with how the girls were left after they were deceased. Like, what do you mean specifically? Something involving sticks, how sticks were configured there, either on them or around them. Did you ever look at the crime scene photos? Yes, we were all shown the crime scene photos. Okay, and there was also something on a tree. Do you remember that? Yes. What do you remember about that? There was a shape or a sign of some sort. It's been 3 years. I can't recall what it was specifically. So I'm going to hand you, for example, Exhibit D and ask you to review that. Yes. Okay. I want to talk about the construct. I've been sitting all day, trying to. You're good. I appreciate it. The way that Unified Command was structured. Who was giving you particularly your marching orders about what to do, if anyone was? I don't even know that anyone was. 4 people. May I mention them? Sure. Absolutely. Primarily Jay Harper and Jerry Holman, assigned out of Lafayette District Post, and then Tony Liggett and Kevin Hammond from the Carroll County Sheriff's Department. Do you know any of those people before this? Started working on the investigation? Yes, sir. Which ones? The 2 troopers, Jerry Holman and Jay Harper, I did know. Okay. And so, like, on a typical day, would you just kind of run your own leads? Like a tip and you'd go do it on your own? Or would you get directions from somebody, or how would that work? Almost entirely on my own, with the exception of a couple of people. And I was paired up primarily with 3 people. Melinda Garcia, who's now a corporal at State Police Lowell. We went out on multiple leads together, especially when we were doing evidence collection, swabbing. And then I'm trying to think. Roland Purdy, who is out of the Fort Wayne Post. We went on several trips together. And now a Terre Haute FBI task force member who is deceased, actually killed the day I retired. And that's Greg Ferenczi, F-E-R-E-N-C-Y. Do you think there's any linkage between Ferenczi's death and anything that has to do with Odinism? No. So Ferenczi, who were the other 2? I'm sorry, Melinda Garcia, Roland Purdy and Linda Garcia. I'm sorry, Melinda Garcia. Melinda Garcia. I haven't seen a lot of Melinda Garcia's name. In fact, I haven't seen her name on anything. Was she involved in the Odinism aspect of the investigation? She would have been at a meeting where Tony Portwood explained to us at the old NIPSCO building everything about it. I believe she would have been. But I don't think she was involved after that briefing or that discussion. And I'm going to cut to the end of the book here a little bit, and then we'll fill in the middle. But whatever became of the Odinism aspect of the crime scene? Did it just get extinguished? Was it just ended, and there was no interest in that anymore? What happened? How did it end if it ended at all? I would say it just went away. It stopped being looked at. Did you think it should be continued to be looked at? Because I wasn't here from the onset of the investigation, I didn't know if we should keep running with it or not, and I wasn't part of that unified command. So as you said earlier, I kind of took my marching orders and just did what I was told, and went where I was needed. Did Tony Liggett at some point in time say, "You don't need to investigate the Odinism angle anymore"? I don't remember that, no. Did anybody from the unified command ever tell you we're kind of done working on the Odinism angle? I can't remember anybody saying that. Okay, so do you feel like you were able to follow through on all the leads that you needed to follow through on? No. Tell me about that. We had a couple of leads where we would get a sample from people, and then it was kind of like we were done. And I felt like sometimes there were a lot more questions to be asked, a lot more time matchups. It seems like I spent a ton of time out at this Indiana Packers, the hog plant, and we simply went in there and were pulling people off the production line of this production factory. And it seemed like we just didn't get a whole lot of time with those people when we were talking to them. I remember that specifically. What about related to Elvis Fields? Did you feel like that was fully investigated? Elvis Fields felt like an absolute train wreck of information. And what I mean by that is questioning the reliability of where the information on him was coming from. And it actually was disturbing to me how it's very far away. Greg Ferenczi and I made multiple trips down to Rushville and to that area, and I could talk for hours about how frustrating it was. Can you give like the dime novel version of why it was frustrating? Specifically, his sister Mary Jacobs, who the information was coming from. And I remember the first time that Roland Purdy and I went to go see her. I don't believe Greg Ferenczi was there yet. And I saw in her house, in her home, prescription bottles of psych meds all over the place. And I know what psych meds are because my wife's a nurse and sure, has dealt with psych patients. And I saw all these different kind of medications and I thought, how reliable is anything she's going to tell us, being with what I'm seeing here in this room? Sure. But it doesn't necessarily mean that she's unreliable necessarily? Correct. Was there anything that she said to you or to, I know she was polygraphed at some point in time? Yes, I took her. Okay, who else was there at the polygraph? Roland Purdy and the examiner who's now deceased, Stephanie Thompson. She was from Monticello. She did the examination. And she passed the examination, didn't she? I didn't understand whether she passed it or didn't see any patterns of untruthfulness. Okay, the things that Mary Jacobs said in that polygraph examination, is that also fertile ground of information that you could take and look at? Yes. Did you look at the things that Mary Jacobs said in the polygraph? During the polygraph? Yes, I believe we watched it. Was there anything that Mary Jacobs said in that polygraph examination that caused you to think, oh, there's some interesting information there about Elvis, that Elvis has told her? Yes. What was that? She's very specific. I want to protect my little brother. I don't want to reveal or divulge anything, but I've got to come clean and tell you everything that he said to me and everything that happened. I know when I read the report on that, it said that the polygraph examination report said that Mary wrote down a lot of stuff in the pre-interview, and then basically the relevant question at the end was, is everything that you wrote down true? Right. It was in a journal. I remember the journal specifically. It was a black like Franklin Planner journal that you would keep, or a diary. Did Mary actually write down for Stephanie Thompson information on that day of the polygraph as well? I don't remember, sir. Okay, and that's fine. But also Stephanie would be asking Mary Jacobs questions during the pre-interview, I would be presuming, is that? Yes, and it seems like it was a pretty long examination. I think I saw 2 hours or more. It was. And it was videotaped? Yes. Okay, do you know where that videotape is? The state police has it. It's called the State Police Repository Lab in Indianapolis. They have to have a copy of it. We retained those for years, okay? And then I'm going to kind of go through I handed you earlier. Right. What's been marked as Exhibit G, I believe. Is that what that says on there? It does, sir. And that's a document in 12 parts. 12 pages? Yes, sir. Were you familiar with this document? Yes. Okay, tell me how you're familiar with it. These, from looking at them now and refreshing my memory, are field notes that were typed into a simple Word document on my state police laptop, so at the end of every day I would type these notes up. Okay, so are all of these notes from you believe? I do believe, yes, they're mine. Okay, so I wanted to ask you some questions about, we're limited in time and we may have to meet again. I hate doing that to you down the road. Sir, it's what we do. I'm happy to drive up to see you, by the way. Okay, if that helps. But there's this story on page 9 that Amber Holder talks about when, I'll just read right off of it on page 9. Amber Holder stated that Brad Holder, of Patrick Westfall one time when he was intoxicated and said that he and Patrick got into a fight. They no longer spoke to each other. He told her that he and Westfall were in the woods near a river conducting a ritual. One of them said or did something the other did not agree with, and they no longer talked to each other. Do you remember that? Yes. Okay. Are you the one that interviewed Amber Holder on that? Yes. If I put it in a report, it wasn't hearsay. It was directly from her to me. Now that seems to be a pretty big deal to me when I hear that. Did you think that was a pretty big deal to hear? I did. Okay. What did you do to follow up on that, if anything? Went back and presented this to the command team, the incident command team. Who again would you have presented that to? Primarily Jay Harper. There were times when Kevin would be gone, Tony would be gone, they had vacations. Jerry Holman would be gone. And through all of that, I was there quite frequently just with Jay Harper. So maybe Jay Harper or probably Jay Harper is what you're saying? Yes. I mean, do you have a specific memory of telling the Amber story to Central Command people? Yes. Who do you specifically remember telling that? To Jay Harper. To Jay Harper. Was there anybody else that after you would talk to these people you write down your notes? I sometimes wouldn't even leave a driveway or interview. I would start putting notes in. One of those things that's also piquing my interest is in February when you talked to Elvis at the Rushville PD. Do you remember that? Unfortunately, I do. Why is that? May I speak freely? Sure. He pissed me off. Why did he piss you off? Like he was playing a game with us, and Elvis has the, I thought about this on the way down, if I was asked about him. He has the mental capacity of maybe a 7 or 8-year-old. From the history of talking to Mary. Very abused as a child. I don't know if he went past 8th grade in school. And he thinks all of this is a joke. And I don't take any murder as a joke, particularly 2 girls from Delphi here. There's this, that was videotaped too, right? Yes, video and audio. Do you know where that is? Yes, at Rushville Police Department. Rushville has it? Yes, every single time we talked to anybody in Rushville, it was in an interview room on audio and video camera. And did you ask Rushville to keep this for future use? Yes. Did you take it and give it to the central repository, as you say? On some of those interviews, CDs were burned and they were turned into state police. Do you know which ones? Like that one with Elvis? That one, yes. It would have been taken to the Lafayette State Police Post, to the evidence clerk. And do you think Rushville also has it? Yes, they have to. Okay, very good. Of course I was very intrigued by this. Elvis, you drop him off, and then he turns around. And then he asks you if his spit is found on one of the girls, but he can explain it. Will he still be in trouble? Yes. I remember dropping him off at his trailer. He moved in a new trailer that Ned Smith had put him in. That's his paving boss. And when he said that to me, I almost fell out of my car. And what did you do to follow up on that? Immediately took it into command and wrote up. Pretty sure I wrote up a more thorough long-term report than these field notes. All we have are these field notes. Do you have actual larger? I mean, I'm not blaming you for that, but there's a lot of discovery out there and we're just trying to figure what might exist out there. Do you think there's a longer, more official-looking document like this? Yes, sir. Related to, yeah, that's an RMS report, it looks like. Okay, so somewhere there is probably what you have written down in Exhibit G. There might be more official documentation somewhere. Yes, okay. So again, this business that Elvis said if spit is found on one of the girls, could he explain it? Who did you tell that to? I immediately called Jay Harper and discussed at command, and it sparked enough interest that all of us went down there one day together. I mean all of us. I mean 8 of us all went down there and caravan together and talked to Elvis Fields and talked to Ned Smith, his paving boss. And at some point in time, even his sister Joyce. A different sister. Not Mary Jacobs, but Joyce Moffett. Do you remember her? A little bit. The name certainly I remember. She confirmed that Elvis told her that he had spit on a girl. Do you remember that? I do. Okay. Did that get reported to Central or Unified Command? Yes. Is it fair to say that everything in Exhibit G was reported to Unified, Uniform, Command? Every bit of it, sir. Okay. And would that simply be Harper, or would it sometimes be other people? Most all the time I reported directly to Jay Harper. And it's your understanding that anything that Harper would find important he would pass on to Liggett? Yes. And anything that Harper found important that you sent to Harper or talked to Harper about, he would send on to Holman. Yes, sir. Johnny Messer, he's an interesting character, don't you think? Did you ever talk to Johnny Messer? Witness shakes head. Maybe you don't know him. Well, you know what? You interviewed Taylor Hornaday, Johnny Messer's ex-girlfriend. Okay, does that ring a bell? It does. That's on page 4. Did you ever talk to Johnny Messer? It's on page 4, in the middle there. There's a little Johnny Messer subheading. I remember going by a dilapidated home and he wouldn't let us come in. I can't. I'm pretty sure I would have been there with Greg Ferenczi, and I do now remember talking to Johnny Messer. Now, did you find it interesting that Messer was from Rushville, but he also knew Brad Holder and Patrick Westfall? Yes. Why was that interesting to you? Well, the crime occurred here in Delphi, the Delphi proximity where Westfall and Holder live, and here's this guy in Rushville. I just thought it was a bizarre coincidence. It is a bizarre coincidence. Did you tell that bizarre coincidence of Johnny Messer from Rushville, who is also friends with Brad Holder and Patrick Westfall? Did you tell all of that to Unified Command? Yes, and that would mean Harper. Jay Harper. Jay Harper. And then you would expect Jay Harper to tell that to the rest of Unified Command? I would. Liggett and Holman, is that right? And Kevin Hammond? Yes. Kevin Hammond, yes. What were your makings of Taylor Hornaday? What did you think of her? I can't remember her offhand. She's on the bottom of page 4. See if that rings a bell, or just kind of looking at it. She said, I'll just quote off page 5, and maybe see if this refreshes your recollection. She said that Messer told her he had done horrible things and should be in prison. Does that ring a bell? It does. Okay. She states that all Vinlanders were into Odinism. Holder and Westfield talk about making their own weapons in the form of knives and hammers, and that she was that he had borrowed her vehicle and went up there to hang out with the Vinlanders. Do you remember that? Yes. Your understanding is up there is Delphi. Yes, specifically. What Taylor Hornaday told you, and I gonna sum it up, and you tell me if I'm incorrect here, is around Valentine's Day, Johnny Messer, my boyfriend, borrowed my car and went up to Delphi to hang out with his Vinlander Odinite buddies, and then he came back down sometime afterwards, and there was blood on my car. Does that sound about right? Yes. What did you think of that? Went along with everything in our investigation, that this needs to be pursued and followed. I'm sorry to interrupt. What did you do with that information? The same thing that I've done with any of these incidents. I was here enough of the time that every single morning I was here, I reported any findings from the previous day. I mean, that's a pretty big deal to have blood on a car hanging out with Brad Holder and Westfall. Don't you think? Yes. Out of all these things that I've talked about Amber Holder, talking about what happened, why Patrick Westfall and Brad Holder are no longer friends, something about a ritual in the woods, that the blood on Taylor Hornaday's car that Johnny Messer had used when he was in Delphi, and that Brad Holder said Westfall, but one of them is a giant like he's a Viking, like he's a true like Odinist type guy or something. And I don't remember ever getting to talk to either one of them. As you sit there right now, based upon your investigation into the Odinism angle of what was going on at that crime scene, Do you feel satisfied that it was fully investigated? Meaning Elvis. Patrick Westphal and Brad Holder? Yes. Do you think they had anything to do with this? I can't say yes or no. I'd be speculating. Okay. Do you know what was done in terms of investigation from Unified Command? Once you reported your findings to them from your investigation, do you know what they did in return to follow up on whatever information you provided them, Unified Command? I believe we did documentation through our state police RMS reporting system. Okay, for example, was there ever a search warrant done, asked for on Johnny Messer? I don't remember, sir. Was there ever a search warrant done that you know of for Brad Holder? I don't remember. Do you know if there was a search warrant requested for Patrick Westphal? I do not. Okay. I mean, do you think it would have been a good idea for Unified Command to ask for a search warrant for those folks based upon what's contained in that 12-page document identified as Exhibit G? If there's enough evidence to substantiate a judge doing a search warrant, yes. I don't know if it would fit the parameters for that. Okay, do you know about the Richard Allen side of the investigation? I know nothing. I've heard the name, read about it. Just sparked my interest. I was going to ask you, do you think that there was more information that might cause, let's say, Brad Holder to be associated with the crime scene, and therefore evidence of the crime might be in place that would justify a search warrant? It was Libby's blood. I'm gonna show you. This was something in Brad Holder's Facebook page. I'm showing you Defendant's Exhibit F, side by side with the blood that was on the tree. Do you see a similarity to those two? Yes. You said this was from his Facebook page? Yes. Okay. Had you seen that before? I can't remember, but I would say this is the same indication as that the F, if you want to call it that. Yes. Looks similar? Did you know if Brad Holder had a fixation with runes? Had you ever heard that before from Unified Command? I heard that people that follow worship are into Odinism, are into what you call these runes. The symbol, the signs. Okay, it's the core of their beliefs from what I understand. Do you find that? Just as an investigator with all your years of experience, do you find all the stuff about Brad Holder, for example, Exhibit, what is that, F and Exhibit B combined? That they were both on his Facebook page and that those are mimicking, at least in my opinion, what maybe Robert Ives called signatures left at the crime scene? Does that bother you as an investigator? Is that worth investigating? Yes, it is. Had you ever seen that side by side with the F next to the blood in the tree? I don't think I have. I don't want to say yes or no. You haven't. That's ours. We put that together. So let me say it a different way. The F on the left that's from Brad Holder's Facebook page, have you ever seen that? No. If you were investigating this and you saw that F and you saw the other Exhibit B, would you pursue some type of investigation after looking at those? I'd try to get a search warrant based on that. Okay, all right, okay. I'm moving ahead, trying to move here. Elvis's alibi. There was talk about his phone being off, or I didn't really understand that. Can you tell me about Elvis's phone on the 13th? Do you remember that? That particular day, the 13th, and he claimed he was in Rushville the whole time. As I remember, it was off. It was off from like 10:30 till later on that night. Like a 9-hour window, and I just found that and his other patterns of his phone always being on, you know, longitude, latitude, triangulation coordinates, saying he was in Rushville. I found it odd that on particular day, it was off or out of service or dead battery. Whatever the case might be. Is that, I hadn't seen that technical data or metadata or whatever. Does that exist somewhere? Yes. Okay, and then you add to that the Rod Abrams. Do you remember Rod Abrams, his roommate? Yes, and he gave you an alibi that they were where? Do you remember that? I don't remember where he said they were. Muncie, does that ring a bell? I believe they were at a hospital about. Somebody that was passed away or dying. Did that get investigated to say if that alibi was correct or was accurate? I don't remember if that got investigated. Okay, there was a June 2018 interview with Elvis. Do you remember that? The first one was in February, and then there was one later on in June. One of them was at the police department. I don't think they were both there. Okay, Do you remember the June one at all? Let me see if I can. Here's what I'll read right off the page. 1. Elvis was interviewed by Ferenczi, if I'm saying that correctly. Greg Ferenczi. Ann Murphy. He said he was not in Delphi on 2/13. He says he was in Russiaville. Claims some of his unusual Facebook posts are just decorations he likes to make. Elvis tells interviewers that he's not in a gang. Gangs were never mentioned by the interviewers. Right. Do you remember that? Yes. Okay. And it's interesting because in the January interview of Mary Jacobs, she said that he was in a gang now. And now he brought up that he was in a gang. And you didn't even bring it up. Is that correct? Yes. Did you find that to be weird? I did. And did you report that to Unified Command? Yes. Okay. And was that to Harper? It would have been. Yes. All right. And was that interview recorded? Would it have been recorded, the June 2018 interview? Does it say where it was, sir? No. It just says Elvis interviewed by Ferenczi and Murphy. It doesn't say where. If it wasn't at the police department, it was not recorded. Would there have been handwritten notes? Yes. Okay, do you know where those handwritten notes would be? No. Okay. Might they be in the central repository? Oftentimes, notes just went straight, scribbly notes, to this. Okay, yes, sir. Those are the notes then, kind of? Yes. So I want to talk about when was the last time that you remember talking to a few of the players in this thing. Elvis. We left Rushville that day. All of us after we talked to several people. That would have been the last time. Okay. Well, you did. Didn't you say you took them to get— Oh no, that was Mary Jacobs. I took his sister, Mary Jacobs, to get the polygraph down at the central repository. Okay, and in June, you did a June interview with Elvis. Would that have been the last time you talked to him? It would have been when we all went down together, okay? And talked to Elvis and Ned Smith and the roommate that lived in the trailer. Okay, Mary Jacobs. When was the last time you talked to her? It's been since the same time. Do you think you talked to her after the polygraph? Yes, okay. Joyce Moffat, do you remember talking to her? I wouldn't have talked to her since. I know Mary Jacobs tape-recorded Elvis. Was that at your request, or did very high upstate police command, above our unified command, had you asked Mary Jacobs to tape-record Elvis? We tape-recorded Elvis with Mary there at her house, and it was conducted and coordinated by investigator Aaron Campbell, Aaron, like Aaron Campbell. Okay, so that was she agreed to do that? Hesitantly, but yes. I'm reading off of page 1, a January 2018 interview with Mary Jacobs. Do you remember the first time you interviewed Mary Jacobs? Yes. Would that have been the January 2018 interview? Yes. And was that recorded in some fashion? No. I wrote it in this notebook right here. Oh, okay. That very one? Yes. Okay. Well, I actually think we have your notes from that. And I wish I would have brought them so I could ask you. But if I call you and fax them to you, would you be able to say, oh yeah, that's my writing? Yes. Okay, cool. Okay, you already told me that. Did you ever talk to Greg Ferenczi about this video that he found of Westfall and Holder conducting some type of sacrificial ritual in Fort Wayne? Does that ring a bell? I remember him talking about it. He was more the social media guy. Uh-huh. I don't even have Facebook. I mean, yeah. I remember that conversation because we spent hours in the car where I would pick him up, believed to be deceased with sticks placed over their bodies. And that's from Holder's media account, Brad Holders. Would that cause you any concern or— Yes. Why? The similarities of sticks and patterns being placed on two girls, one who I know is deceased from the case we worked, and the other one that I don't know if that's posed or genuine. Do you think that could be a big deal if that's on Holder's media sites? Yes. Would that be deserving of some type of search warrant, just based upon that photo alone? Yes. Redirect examination. You mentioned that you went to Mary Jacobs' home, and when you walked in you said, well, let me ask you this. Were there other people living with her? Yes. How many people were living with her? There was a daughter that lived downstairs that worked in Walmart. Her name I don't have in my mind, and then I'm specific her husband's name was Troy. He would not talk to us. His name is Troy Jacobs, that's her husband. And so there were other people in the home. How much time did you spend in that home, if you could just estimate? We made several trips to that home. It's a very distinguished home. It's built in the side of a hill, across a little rickety narrow bridge. And I don't remember the number of trips we made, but we were always there at least an hour, sometimes more. And did you mentioned these pill bottles. Did you actually, I'm gonna say this in kind of a loose sense, but kind of audit the information that was on those bottles to determine whose bottles they were? Yes. What was your discovery? They were Mary Jacobs prescriptions that I'm familiar to be for either depression or anxiety or psychological. Were you able to determine the time frame that those prescriptions were offered up or that they were filled, if you will? They looked like they were being used every day. Did you ever see Mary Jacobs taking pills? I did not. Did you ever ask her if she was taking pills? I did not. Did you ever see any kind of other signs around the house that, hey, she's taking these pills routinely? Maybe she had a little pill box that people use. Like the Monday through Sunday? Yeah, I don't remember that. No. She was polygraphed? Yes. I took her. So I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, if you're going to polygraph someone, that you would do that. You wouldn't do that if you didn't think somebody was in the right frame of mind. Yes. I mean, if somebody was intoxicated, for example, it wouldn't help you to polygraph them, right? Or under the influence of any type of prescription. Did you ever look into Mary Jacobs' background to see if she had any history of mental illness? Yes. What did you find? She did. What was the extent of that? Just from her childhood, she and Elvis, which she actually discussed openly, were subject to physical, sexual, and emotional abuse ever since the time they were toddlers. I'm going to ask maybe a little bit more pointed question. What about clinical history of mental illness, where she had been institutionalized or anything like that? I thought she had been institutionalized at some point and possibly was treated. I believe it was the term schizophrenia. Do you remember? Would you have noted that in your report? No. Why not? We were taking the information she had. She was seeing a medical provider. She didn't. Other than she seemed anxious sometimes. She didn't seem to be not in her right mind when we talked to her. That was my next question. So when you were talking with her, you felt like she was being rational and coherent and those types of things? Yes. Did you ever have any sense from her that she was being deceptive with you intentionally? No. You mentioned there were 3 or 4 things that Mr. Baldwin asked you about, like the spit comment. Those things definitely kind of resonated with you as being very significant comments, right? Yes. At the time that you reacted to those, I think you basically said every time he said something that kind of caught your attention or caught your ear, that you reported it immediately. Yes. So I mean, when he was saying it, you believed in the veracity, or at least you thought it was important enough that you had to report it. Yes. And so it wasn't like he was joking with you, or kind of slapstick humor, or anything like that? Not when I dropped him off at that trailer. The one thing that hasn't been asked, and I've got to tell you about it. Yeah, Mary was absolutely certain around the 14th that he had these clothes. It's been mentioned in every report I've ever done that he had these specific clothes that were from the guy on the bridge, and then she would revert to, well, he might not have been wearing those clothes, or those were his clothes, but somebody else wore them, and then she would cut to, maybe he wasn't the guy, but I know he was there. She would always say to Greg Ferenczi or Roland Purdy or me, I know he was there, and she would not let go of that. Did you ever draw any conclusions about any motive she had for placing him at that scene? No, or ratting him out, as we say in the business. I'm a good Christian woman, and I just can't live with myself if I don't tell somebody. Were you a party to any? We're going to talk about Odinism again, okay? Were you a party to any communications with anyone at Purdue University as it related to that cult, is what I'm going to call it? I don't remember any. What about the FBI? Talking to anybody from the FBI about this particular organization? Yes. Who was that? Early on, like day 2 or 3 of the Delphi investigation. I don't remember the guy's name, but he was head of the FBI office in Maryville when his team was here, and I heard about it in whispers. We found these sticks at the scene, and they were covered on top of the girls. The FBI was really focused on it, and actually had people out in Virginia that specialize in what these sticks mean. Were you a party to any conversations or information exchanged with those people in Virginia? No. What about U.S. Marshals? I was on their task force for 9 years prior to going to the FBI, and they were only here as a task force briefly the first week or two, and then they disappeared. Okay, were you, just to make sure I'm understanding your answer, which I think is no, were you a party to any information exchanges with U.S. Marshals involving Odinism? No. Anyone else other than the individual in Indianapolis that you mentioned earlier? Tony Portwood. Yeah. And some of these whispers with the FBI? Yes. That's the only 2 times that you were involved in any information exchange regarding Odinism? Yes. I'm going to ask this. You mentioned Brad Holder earlier, and that some people communicated to you that he might be dangerous. Is that a fair summary of what you said? Brad Holder and Westfall being the big guy. Do you believe Brad Holder is a dangerous man? To me, no. Well, to society? Well, I've got a daughter and wife, and if they were walking alone and he was in their proximity, I'd have a problem with it. I have a daughter, 3 daughters, and a wife. Is that something I should be concerned about if they were in the area? If he lives in my town? I'd be keeping tabs on him, at the very least. Somebody that's got a propensity for violence. What about Westfall? Same questions. Yes. If not more so. I'm nervous about. I'm just going to be honest with you. I'm very nervous about raising this all up and talking about Holder and Westfall and Odinism, knowing what I see on there, on these photographs and images. Do you think I should be worried down in Indianapolis as well? If these guys catch wind that I'm questioning whether they're involved in this murder? I don't know their histories or criminal histories, like, are they involved in petty theft, burglaries, violence? But sometimes people are posers, so they want you to think they're tough, but maybe they're not. And I kind of gathered that when I walked away with the Vinlanders, so to speak, you know. 'Cause what evidence is there that any of them have been involved in any, I don't want to say horrific, but physical crimes? Well, that makes me feel a little bit better. Well, I'm being honest with you. No, I appreciate it. Maybe I'm just overly freaked out, but I appreciate your. My whole belief is different now than what it was even 5 years ago when I was with the state police. Because the guy that drove me here, my son, because I work midnights, we've changed our whole thought process on law enforcement, my family, that you've got to do what you can do to protect yourself, so we train constantly. We all know what happened with the George Floyd case, and our whole force continuums have changed. I just turned 60, so I might be in a little town, but I'm patrolling by myself, and I'm patrolling right next to a state prison. So my 360 is always, unfortunately. Maybe with your family member too. I live in the same town as Brad Holder, not entirely all that far from here. So it's something where I probably should take some extra precautions if this becomes public. I always thought about. I went to Butler. I majored in journalism. Often that's a prerequisite for law school. And I think if I'm a lawyer in private practice and based on the kind of casework I do, I'm always going out like a cop off duty, like just protecting myself, protecting my family. I'm not saying walk around in a state of paranoia. Yeah, but this is no different. Yes, should I have a heightened sense of security? I don't know these people, so should I have a heightened sense of awareness because I never really heard anything about them after that? You know, it seemed like everything they did was kind of restricted or within their little group. Once this gets made public, I think, where our concern is that Holder hears that we're, you know, saying that he might be involved, or Westfall, most people, I think, when they get accused of something like that, they go into a fight or flight mode. I think I'm not saying they're going to run away, but they're going to be more inclined to, hey, it's not me. What you've shown me and the things they post, that's difficult to explain. Most of this I've not ever seen before. Appreciate it. Thank you. These are frankly a little bit more personal questions. I think you were asked about Mr. Ferenczi? I'm sorry, I'm struggling. Greg Ferenczi, yes. You didn't think his death was in any way associated with any of his works in this case. Not this case. What about Stephanie Thompson? She died in a house fire, accidental house fire, from what I understand. So you don't believe that that was connected? No. No. Greg was killed as I walked out of the Capitol building in Indianapolis to retire, so it was pretty traumatizing for me. I don't have anything else. Do you want a review and sign? Do you want her to type it up, send it to you, let you look at it and sign it? Or do you trust that she's going to do it accurately? She's good. Your waving signature? Yes, sir. What were you going to say, Andy? If I get a hold of you in the future, would you be willing to talk to me? In terms of, yes, even in a deposition setting, like if new questions pop up, but especially like there's this. I want to make sure that these handwritten notes that I'm pretty sure are yours from Mary Jacobs in January of 18. I want to make sure that they're yours and I can just reach you. Yes, I might have attached them to something that got submitted electronically. So yes, and I can look and figure out to get a hold of you through the town. What is it called again? The town you work? Beverly Shores. I can give you my number and email right now.